on while I start recording. Just a moment, please.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. It is February 7th, 2022. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting is being conducted via remote means. Given that we have a quorum of the council present, I'm calling the February 7th, 2022 meeting of the Amherst Town Council to order at 6:15 p.m. I'll call upon each councilor by name. At that time, they should unmute their mic and say present. This indicates they can hear us and we can hear them. And then please remember to mute your mic again. Shalini Balmilne.
Present.
Pat DeAngelis.
Present.
Anna Devlin Gauthier.
Present.
Lynn Griesmer is present. Mandy Johanneke.
Present.
Anika Lopes.
Present.
Michelle Miller.
Present.
Dorothy Pam.
Present.
Pam Rooney. Pam, you need to unmute.
Pam, can you hear us?
Pam, can you hear us? You need to unmute and say present.
I don't think she can hear us.
I don't either. I'm going to go on. Can you contact her?
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Here.
Andy Steinberg is absent. Jennifer Taub.
Present.
And Alicia Walker is not here yet. Pam, can you hear us? Okay. Just give me 1 second, please. I don't think she can hear us. Pam, can you hear us? Oh, Athena's doing what she can.
I'm calling her.
Okay. Meantime, I'm going to also call the Finance Committee to order. Bob Hegner.
Present.
And Matt Holloway.
Present.
Bernie Kubiak is not here. Okay. This is actually a public forum. It's regarding additional appropriations outside the annual budget. We will have a brief presentation. It is a joint meeting of the Finance Committee and the Town Council. Let me mention there is another meeting after this one. It is a regular Town Council meeting. We will stay on this same Zoom link for all of these meetings. And when I adjourn the meeting of the public forum, I will keep the Finance Committee and those council members that are on the Finance Committee. And we just need to check in to see whether or not we are going to reconsider our recommendation to the Town Council regarding these appropriations. So with that, I'm going to quickly mention there's no chat room. If you have technical issues, please let Athena and me know, and we'll do whatever we may need to do to either note that in the record or stop the meeting if necessary. We'll wait for announcements at the next meeting, which is starting at 6:30. And with that, I'm going to call upon Sean Mangano, our Finance Director, to make a brief presentation. And he is joined tonight by Sonia Aldridge.
Yes, and we also have Chief Nelson and Assistant Chief Stromgren with us tonight too, if there's questions.
Yes, we do.
Athena,
Thank you for joining us.
Perfect, and you can go to the next slide, Athena. So the first request is for additional funds for the fire department pumper truck. The request amount is $187,000. The funding source being proposed is free cash. These funds would supplement an existing borrowing authorization that was approved last June as part of the FY22 capital plan. and that the amount of that authorization was for $450,000. So the total cost of the proposed vehicle is $637,000. This does not include the zero RPM technology, which would be an additional amount, but we have sustainability funds for that additional amount. So that piece is not included in this cost. The reason for this request is sort of three things. The first is that when the chief went to price out the vehicle using a statewide contract, there were some additional options that they wanted to include that make the vehicle increase its operational capacity. It allows it to act as an emergency response vehicle, among some other options that were added that make it a more useful vehicle. The other two reasons are related. One, the estimate was a little bit out of date, and that coupled with vehicle inflation that's been rising very rapidly in the last couple of years. Those three things combined for why the original request came in under. The urgency for this, for approving this request is high because the lead time to construct this vehicle, they're built pretty much from the ground up, is about 500 days or a year and a half. So even if we are able to order this by next month, it'll be a couple of years before we actually see it. And the next request. So the next one is for additional funds for the elementary school feasibility study. The amount of the additional request is $280,000, the same funding source, free cash. These funds will supplement a borrowing authorization of $750,000, which was approved, I think, in 2020. And so that would bring the total cost of the feasibility study to $1,030,000. The two reasons for, or the three, there's three, but the two here are the original estimate was low. We were hoping that the work that was performed during the previous feasibility study back in 2015, and then the Fort River feasibility study, that the work of those consultants could be reused and therefore save us money for this study, and that was not the case. Most notably, the traffic study, there was no traffic study done for Fort River, and the one done from Wildwood is out of date, and our consultants want an up-to-date apples-to-apples comparison for Fort River and Wildwood for traffic. And then the second major piece here is to support compliance with the net zero bylaw, and that the new building will have to comply. There's some new things that are part of this study that were not part of the last study. Most notably geothermal planning and solar planning, which go into making sure the building will comply. The third thing I'll just say is that OPM costs and architecture costs are often a percentage of total construction, and total construction costs for buildings like this has also gone through the roof in the recent years. Just the construction cost escalation has been really high in the last few years. You've probably heard about the cost of wood and things like that. All of that's going up. So the urgency for this one is also high because we're on a tight timeline to make sure we can vote on this project in early 2023, I think is the goal. So these funds will ensure that we can perform the rest of the feasibility study without any delays. And we're confident that this number will allow us to do that. We don't anticipate any additional funds being needed after this. And that's that.
Thank you, Sean. We're not going to have counselor comments. I'm going to go immediately to public comment. Please raise your hand if you would like to make public comment with regard to either of these appropriations. We will have general public comment later. This meeting will go till at least 6:33 in order to meet the requirements of the law. Am I correct on that one, Athena?
I have 6:27.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Right. Do I see any hands? Let me mention that the council will have an opportunity to ask questions during the regular council meeting. Are there any questions with regard to these appropriations which are outside the normal budget routine, annual budget process? Again, as people join us, does anybody have questions about either the additional money for the fire equipment and/or the additional money for the elementary school feasibility study. Okay, I'm going to ask again, any questions about either of these appropriations that are outside the normal annual budget process? We are completing our public forum, and I'm asking one more time if there are any questions with regard to the additional appropriation with regard to the fire equipment and/or the money for the fees to continue the feasibility study for the elementary school. Athena, have I met my time?
Not quite. We have a minute and a half left.
Okay. Okay, one more option. This is regarding just either the elementary school or the fire equipment. And Mahir Thakur, if I've mispronounced your name, I apologize. Please enter the room and state your question or comment. You need to unmute. Mahir, you need to unmute. Athena, is there anything we can do to help him?
I sent a request to unmute. I think we've lost them.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no more questions on this item of appropriations outside the budget, I'm going to adjourn the council. Please do not leave. I am not adjourning the Finance Committee meeting. And so I need to ask the Finance Committee members, both the council members and the non-voting residents, to raise your hand if at this point you feel we need to reconsider our recommendation to the council regarding these two appropriations. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands with regard to that. And so I am going to adjourn the Finance Committee meeting. You are welcome to stay for the rest of the council meeting. We will probably place you in the audience, however. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us, Matt, and also Bob. Take care.
Here.
I'm going to wait another minute, call the meeting to order and recheck for people who can hear us. Okay. Given that we have a quorum of the council present, I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Amherst Town Council to order at 6:30. It is February 7th, 2022. I want to recheck people because we had some problems hearing people before. Shalini Balmilne,
I'm here.
Pat DeAngelis,
Present.
Anna Devlin Gothier,
Present.
Lynn Griesmer's present, Mandy Jo Haneke,
Present.
Anika Lopes,
Present.
Michelle Miller,
Present, though I don't see how I can mute myself any longer. So, oh, here we go.
okay, thank you. Dorothy Pam,
Here.
Pam Rooney,
Present.
thanks Pam. Kathy Shane,
Here.
Andy Steinberg is absent. Jennifer Taub,
Present.
and Alicia Walker. And I do need to make sure that it's noted that Alicia Walker joined us during the public forum so that that goes into the record. We are going to.
Can we hear that Alicia can hear us?
Yes, thank you, Lynn. Present.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Athena. Okay. We're going to quickly show the announcements. They're on your thing. There's no special announcements except for the fact that the Joint Capital Planning Committee is going to begin meeting on February 10th, this Thursday. And there is a Four Towns meeting this Thursday as well. The council will have a retreat on the 12th. We'll talk more about that later on. We can move on to our hearing. And I believe that Nick Langon has joined us. Is that correct? Welcome back, Nick.
Good evening.
So this is a public hearing. It's actually a continuation of our previous public hearing on 2 of the 5 items. One of those items, 46 Rolling Ridge Road, Nick will confirm, but I believe it has been withdrawn.
Correct. Eversource formally withdraws that petition.
Thank you. We are going to continue, however, with Woodside Avenue. The time allocated to public hearings at any meeting of the council shall be no more than 3 hours in duration. And we're going to begin with a brief presentation from Eversource. Nick, would you like us to show the slide with the map on it?
Sure. If you could bring up the new map, that probably helps. Okay, so at the last meeting, I was asked to take another look at this project and see if we could find a compromise where we wouldn't require an additional pole on Woodside Ave. So I did go out there with our operations supervision, and we came up with a plan that was a little more, there'll be a little more work on Eversource's part, but at the end of the day, there will be no additional new poles. We're going to take the pole that's right in front of the religious center, labeled 164/4, and we're going to shift that pole 15 feet to the north, and that should be able to let Amherst College utilize that pole for their new service. I will have to probably take a temporary outage to the customers that are on that transformer because that's going to have to move to pole 164/3. But that will be brief, and those residents will be notified ahead of time. But I think this is a solution that will hopefully make everybody happy.
Okay. Are there questions from councilors? Shalini Balmilne.
Yeah, do the costs of doing this adjustment, do they get transferred to the residents or Amherst College, or does Eversource absorb them?
Due to the nature of this project, there's something written within the legal language and the tariff on electric construction, where a lot of this work is actually going to be absorbed by Eversource anyway. So there won't be really any changes to the customer's bill for this.
Okay. Mandy Jo Haneke.
I just want to say thank you for working with us and hearing our concerns and coming to what I believe is a good solution.
Thank you. Dorothy, Pam Rooney. Please unmute.
I was going to say essentially the same thing. And I would just suggest that as Eversource continues to bring new polls and new service throughout Amherst, that this be sort of a standard procedure that you look to see if there are ways to consolidate rather than just adding additional poll clutter to the town, because we've got plenty of polls. So thank you. Appreciate the effort.
Okay. Are there any other council comments or questions at this point? Then I'm going to ask if there's anybody in the audience who would like to speak to the issue of this poll placement on Woodside Avenue. That is the only topic at this point. Either speak in favor, ask a question. Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to come back to the council. Is there any other comments or questions? Okay, then I'm going to make the following motion and look for a second to close the public hearing for 46 Rolling Ridge Road and Woodside Avenue. Is there a second?
Haneke seconds.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to begin to take a vote on that motion. Pat DeAngelis,
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier,
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye, Mandy Johanicky,
Aye.
Anika Lopes,
Aye.
Michelle Miller,
Yes.
Dorothy Pam,
Yes.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Kathy Shane,
Yes.
Andy Steinberg is absent, Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
Alicia Walker,
Aye.
Shalini Baumel.
Yes.
Thank you. I had originally thought we would do this later, but I am going to suggest that we move immediately to the actual vote on this. All we did was vote to close the hearing. So I'm going to go to the motion that actually regards this poll. And that is to approve the order for poll locations on Woodside Avenue titled Order for Solely Owned Poll Locations dated December 20th, 21, as amended according to the Eversource petition map titled 297 South Pleasant Street dated 2022, February 2nd, 2022. Is there a second?
Haneke seconds.
Is there any other further discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'm going to begin the vote. Anna Devlin Gothier,
Yes.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye, Mandy Johanicky,
Aye.
Anika Lopes,
Aye.
Michelle Miller,
Yes.
Dorothy Pam,
Yes.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Kathy Shane,
Yes.
Andy Steinberg is absent, Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
Alicia Walker,
Aye.
Shalini Baumel,
Yes.
and Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
It is unanimous with 12 people voting and 1 absent. Nick, thank you very much for your extra work and to hear what we had to say and accommodate it. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
It was my pleasure, and I just want to say thank you for your cooperation. And as the representative of Amherst for Eversource, if you guys ever have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me personally, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Okay, we are going to move on to general public comment. Okay. Residents are welcome to express their views for up to 3 minutes at the discretion of the town council president. But before I say 3 minutes for sure, I'm going to ask all of you that would like to make general public comment to raise your hand now. Not later, but now. I'm seeing 11 people. We'll go ahead. If you need the full 3 minutes, please use it, but otherwise we'd appreciate any time you're willing to be more precise and also to listen to what other people might be saying so that you can just either confirm that you agree or not. We now have 13 people and I'm going to hold it at 13. Okay, we'll start with Elisa Campbell. Please enter the room and state your name and where you live.
Elisa Campbell, 27 Pine Grove in Amherst. And I'm wanting to speak on the proposed moratorium. I'm hoping you won't adopt it because I think we're already late in installing carbon-free energy. According to the state study, even if we put collectors on all the roofs that are possible, et cetera, we still need to have about 60,000 acres of land-mounted solar arrays in Massachusetts. And that was assuming that we were going to get a lot of power from Hydro-Quebec, which seems unlikely. If there is going to be a moratorium, I hope that you will create one that is short and that the people creating a bylaw will make sure that it emphasizes putting photovoltaics in the good places, not trying to block them altogether. Time matters in this. We need to reduce our energy greenhouse gas emissions quickly by 2025, 2030 in order to make any difference. It's really a worldwide problem. And we as residents in a rich country that has enjoyed the benefits of fossil fuels for a couple of 100 years are primarily responsible for creating this problem. According to Oxfam, 52% of the carbon emissions in the atmosphere came from the world's 10% most wealthy people. Well, believe it or not, anyone in America who has $100,000 worth of wealth is in the 12% most wealthy people in the world. That means anybody who owns a house in Amherst. I'm not saying we're all individually responsible for that much, but collectively, yes, we are. And I think we really need to fix it. Thank you.
Leisha, thank you for your comment. Ira Brick, please enter the room, state your name and where you live.
I am Ira Brick. I live at 255 Strong Street, and I am hoping that you will pass the moratorium. Somehow, in discussions in Amherst, the word moratorium has equated to the nuclear option, and I think that was just one person's word choice with not a lot to back it up. It's not a nuclear option to pause and figure out what is appropriate and what is inappropriate, and during that time to not let inappropriate things sneak through, whether it's one large solar array or somebody that then breaks it into subdivisions or wants the zoning frozen. These are all of the kinds of things that we want just a little sane time to think about this without kind of having attacks from people that are desperate to put this stuff in forests. There's many intelligent people that want solar, that know a lot about solar, that having all kinds of discussions. Just look at next door to see how many Amherst area solar experts there are that disagree whether it should be in forests or on the Mass Pike or under utility lines. There's a lot to be discovered. And if we can't take a few months to figure it out, if the earth is really crumbling at such a rate that we can't put a pin in it for 6 months to figure this out, we're screwed anyway. And I love the quote by Abe Lincoln that if he had 6 hours to chop down a tree, sorry about chopping down the tree, he would take the first 4 to sharpen the axe. This is our opportunity to sharpen the axe to make sure we get it right. And Amherst can actually be a leader here in figuring it out, just like Obamacare came out of Massachusetts, Romney's plan. We could come up with something that would be a leader for other towns. So it's not only for the good of our town, we could actually do some good nationally and globally by figuring this out correctly. Thank you.
Ira, thank you for your comments. I'm going to say one more time, if you want to make public comment, please raise your hand now. And then I'm cutting it off at, okay. I'm also going to ask people to try to keep their public comment to 2 minutes. Sharon McDonald, please enter the room, state your name and where you live. Sharon, you need to unmute. Athena, can we help her?
I sent a request to unmute. We can come back.
Okay, there we go.
Oh, there she is.
There we go. Thank you, Sharon.
Oh, so sorry about that. Never done this before, so I'm scared to death about it, but let me try to do this. I'm Sharon McDonald at 11 Pine Grove. She, her are my pronouns. I would like to show my support for the temporary moratorium on the large-scale solar farms that will involve the clear cutting of forests here in Amherst. While I realize the need to achieve the carbon neutrality goals set forth by the town is a challenge that is urgent, a bylaw protects us from mistakes that cannot be reversed easily. As eloquently commented by those already, and also at the last CRC meeting and previously, a bylaw would include a careful and integral look at the impacts and externalities of such large clear-cutting projects that would remove mature forest stands and all the ecological services, including reducing climate change through its carbon storage and sequestration that it offers. I think we owe it to the future generations of this town that we have in place a thoughtful policy that carefully weighs the uniqueness and importance of these stands and not just what solar arrays will provide. Already, research supports pro-forestation as the simplest and most effective way to mitigate climate change. Hence, a moratorium to create this bylaw provides the time and energy to investigate this more closely and not take for granted the value of these forests for the invaluable free and unwavering ecological services that these beings continue to give us. Thank you. That's it.
Sharon, thank you for joining us tonight. Eric Backrack, please enter the room, state your name and where you live. And while you're doing that, I just want to mention there's 41 people in the audience. People often like to know that. That does not tell us how many people are on Amherst TV. Eric, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm speaking in support of the temporary moratorium on ground-mounted large-scale solar. Revealed during the public comment period of the Planning Board's December 15th meeting was that the watershed in Shutesbury, which feeds the Atkins Reservoir, is in jeopardy of becoming home to 3 solar arrays in Shutesbury. Also mentioned at this meeting was a 2005 report issued by the Mass DEP Source Water Assessment and Protection Program that recommended that Amherst and Shutesbury work together to create a water supply protection overlay district in the very area where the arrays are proposed. Had this been done 17 years ago, the solar proposed in the watershed would be a no-go zone. The information from the Planning Board meeting triggered a discussion of the potential impact of ground-mounted solar on watersheds at the January 22nd meeting of the Amherst Water Supply Protection Committee. Because so much is unknown about its short and long-term impact on water, a subcommittee of the WSPC was created and charged to look at this complex issue and advise the town. I'm not on Amherst's public water system. My water, like many of my neighbors, comes from an individual well. At the Water Supply Protection Committee meeting, I asked the possible impact on private wells by removing forest land. There was conjecture, but no certainty. I was told that the issue is very complex. I was then referred to the Department of Health, which has the jurisdiction over private wells in Amherst. Since then, I've been in touch with the health department. Mass Woods, a program of UMass's College of Natural Sciences, says, and I quote, "The size and density of our population make water quality arguably the single most important forest product produced in Massachusetts. Clean water is produced from areas where water is slowed down by vegetation and allowed to flow through the soil. As land is developed and taken out of forest use, we lose the benefit of having forests clean our water, end quote. We all know that water is life, and without water, life is impossible to sustain. We need to understand what happens to our public and private water supplies when supplanting forest land with large-scale solar. I support the proposed temporary moratorium on LSA so that we have the time to develop a thoughtful solar bylaw that protects the public and private water supply and the health, safety, and welfare of the town's residents and visitors. Thank you.
Eric, thank you for joining us. Martha Hanner, please enter the room, state your name and where you live.
Martha Hanner, District 5, South Amherst. As a planetary scientist, I strongly support the temporary moratorium on large-scale ground-mounted solar arrays so that we can develop an appropriate solar bylaw with clear guidelines and a careful solar siting study. The urgent climate crisis will be with us for the long term, which is all the more reason we must get it right for the long term, not rush ahead blindly. Large solar installations will be helping us for 25 or 30 years, and we really need to plan them carefully. The temporary pause will give us time to develop a bylaw that will provide for efficient, effective, and safe solar projects. Clear, fair, and consistent rules will benefit developers and save them money. During the pause, developers can still move ahead to prepare plans, conduct their soil tests, and do the necessary environmental assessments of sites. So I do not see this as a serious delay problem. Moreover, I believe the town council has an obligation to support our other hardworking boards and committees. The ZBA has stated their support of the moratorium so that they can have clear guidelines for their decisions, and I hope you will respect their input. Currently, I see battery storage as the biggest stumbling block for large-scale solar projects. It's well known that lithium-ion batteries are problematical. Active research is leading to improved batteries, and I believe there will be a real breakthrough in a few years so that a short-term moratorium may benefit us in the long term. It's well documented that forests draw down about 30% of the human-caused carbon dioxide emissions each year. Western Massachusetts is our state's land bank, so we need to ask, what is our fair share of forest preservation and carbon sequestration? The statement that Amherst needs hundreds of acres of solar seems to have become a mantra, and certainly we need to take seriously having large areas of solar power, but we need to do that based on a careful assessment of the most appropriate sites. So please, let's put this moratorium in place and then get on with the urgent work of preparing a clear bylaw and a careful plan for solar siting. All residents of planet Earth deserve our best efforts. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Martha. Kathleen Bridgewater, please enter the room, state your name and where you live. There she is. Okay.
Here I am. Hello. Good evening. I'm Kathleen Bridgewater. I live on Shutesbury Road, and I'm here to urge you to pass the temporary moratorium on large-scale ground-mounted solar systems. The moratorium is temporary. It will be complete when a new solar bylaw is enacted. A yes vote will give Amherst staff and board members time to carefully consider the many facets of these complex installations, from siting to operation to decommissioning. It will set no restrictions on small residential solar projects, parking lots, or rooftops of buildings. There are currently no standards or regulations specifically for these industrial-sized solar power plants. This is neither helpful for residents nor for the solar developers. Industrial solar systems are quickly becoming an issue for the town to grapple with. There are acres of ground-mounted panels and recently, we have now the gigantic lithium ion storage units. Issues that the working groups will be able to tackle during a temporary moratorium range from drinking water supplies, fire protection, and carbon sequestration. Public and environmental safety should be of utmost concern to you, our public officials. The working group will be able to request advice from scientists who have no financial interest in the outcome of the formation of the solar bylaw. So far, Amherst has been very fortunate in its smaller projects. Other towns have not been so fortunate, and disasters have occurred nearby, multiple ones. Right now, there's a situation in Conway where the actual power plant that was put in had to be turned off because it was impacting the electricity in the houses of all the people who live nearby. People were having noises coming out of their outlets constantly. There are so many things that need to be regulated, watched, supervised, and the town needs to plan in advance so that these problems can be avoided. Thank you so much. Take care. Good night.
Thank you for joining us. I do want to note, and most of you are trying to stay close to within the 2 minutes, and if you could, please do so. Michael Lipinski, please enter the room, state your name and where you live.
I'm Mike Lipinski. I'm going to go as quickly as possible. I live on Shutesbury Road in Amherst. I support the temporary moratorium on ground-mounted solar systems. A factoid frequently referred to by members of various town boards in print and at public meetings is that Amherst needs at least 300 acres of ground-mounted solar to meet its share. To be precise, it's meant to describe our supposed share of the statewide 2050 decarbonization goals. This 300 plus acre number is often used as an argument against a temporary moratorium. Moratorium opponents say, because our share is so big, we need to get it done without any delay. The fact that people are using this number as if it were a given is one of the strongest reasons on why we need this pause. The number comes from a November presentation to ECAC, where a member of the ECAC committee came up with a formula. The formula uses the 60,000 acres of new ground-mounted solar that you heard referred to earlier. His formula first calculates the town's percentage of the total Massachusetts population, and then uses that percentage to determine the town's portion of that 60,000 acre figure. The result, Amherst needs 335 acres or 1.9% of Amherst's total area. It's important to understand that no other Massachusetts towns or agencies use ECAC's population-based formula, and for good reason. It totally ignores the community's actual electrical consumption. When you apply this ECAC formula to every town and city in Massachusetts, the results are stunning. Cities like Somerville, Chelsea, Cambridge, and Boston would need to cover 20 to 25% of their total land area with ground-mounted solar. Scores of other densely populated cities and towns in Massachusetts can't possibly accommodate hundreds or thousands of acres of ground-mounted solar as their share. Their land is already built up and expensive. They know it, they can't do it, and they don't intend to try. On the other end of the scale are small towns like Shutesbury, whose share would be 15 acres. Yet, solar developers hope to place hundreds of acres of ground mount solar there, and there are dozens of small Massachusetts towns similar to Shutesbury. Just as Boston's share is not 5,763 acres, 335 acres is not Amherst's share. We really don't know how much needs to be implemented. And clearly, our town needs time to do more thinking about our approach to ground-mounted solar. We need a moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Michael. Jenny Kalick, please enter the room, state your name and where you live.
Good evening. Thank you, Town Council. I'm going to edit out everything from my remarks that I think I've heard already. I'm in favor of the moratorium. I will add just two ideas I haven't heard. The projects that are coming to Planning Department and ZBA are going to be a degree of difficulty greater than the ones that have already been approved, which is why they may possibly be wanting this bylaw. They will be more difficult in terms of the sites, and they are likely to be much larger. In terms of the time that is set aside for the temporary moratorium, the CARP report has a series of proposals for things that we need to do in town. All of those also are urgent and can be worked on during the temporary moratorium. I think a good use of time, apart from the solar that's not restricted, would be to address the wonderful proposals that the CARP report has given to us. I'd like to just comment briefly on the preamble to the temporary moratorium. We've been told by town lawyers that it is not legally binding, those words in the preamble, but I believe if the town council would like to look at revising that preamble, it would mean that the vote would be both legally binding and the mandate that is issued in the preamble would be clearer. One part of the preamble states that solar is very important and we aggressively and robustly need solar, and that seems like a perfectly good part of the preamble. The part that I think should be looked at and possibly revised relates to stating hundreds of acres. I think the solar siting working group and the solar bylaw committee will be well positioned to help us understand how much and where our solar will be positioned, and therefore it seems preemptive to cite numbers of acres. Perfectly fine to say robust solar and looking to put solar wherever we can, but the numbers seem to me to be preemptive. Thank you all for your work and for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for joining us, Jenny. Ira Addis, please enter the room, state your name and where you live.
I'm Ira Addis. I'm at 192 Shutesbury Road in Amherst. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I am very much in favor of the moratorium. I am a physician. I've dealt with complex issues all of my life, and I have yet to see a situation where gathering a group of well-educated, thoughtful people of good intent does much other than improve the situation. And that's exactly what I think the moratorium would do. It would really allow Amherst to gather the facts and the expertise that we need to set up a process that will work for Amherst. And so I'm an optimist thinking that that would be quite useful. I have to say at this point, after listening to a number of discussions, that I still have a hard time understanding those opposed to a moratorium. We're talking 18 months. We're talking, and I don't understand it because I don't think I've heard the opposition describe factual data that would actually weigh in terms of their position. I've heard opinions. I've heard what they want. I've heard what people are afraid of, but not factual data. And so I would ask anyone who actually votes against a moratorium under these circumstances to please state the facts and not just their sense that it's not a good idea I would also ask them to show us one situation where a moratorium in Amherst has actually hurt the outcome of whatever the town's process is. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Addis. Sharon Weisenbaum. Let me just mention there are 5 additional speakers after this, ending with Laura Drucker, and that's where we will end it tonight. Sharon, please go ahead.
Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. I prepared this thinking I had 3 minutes, so I hope you give me a bit of leeway. The concern I'm bringing this evening is not about the insanity of clear-cutting our most important allies in turning the tide of climate change, meaning the trees, and the carbon sequestration, ecosystems, water control, and purification they provide. Tonight, I want to bring attention to the reason why we need to take our time and put our most thoughtful and intelligent attention to the creation of bylaws around the siting of large-scale solar power plants. At a recent Amherst Environmental and Climate Action Committee meeting, one of the group members said that he had done research and found that the risks associated with clear-cutting forests for large-scale solar power plants were so minimal as to be irrelevant. I would like to know where this research was done and how he came to that conclusion. I've done some of my own research, and I didn't need to go far to see that in Williamsburg, there has been disastrous erosion that poured silt into a huge wetland, destroying it, and into the Mill River. In addition, the company did not follow through on many commitments to the landowner affected and the town. In Conway, where a huge tract of forest was clear-cut to build a solar power plant, there's also been destructive erosion. In addition, the solar company made promises to the residents that they would not be able to see or hear the power plant. Instead, there's been intense noise in homes in a large radius from the plant, loud noise from transformers, and erratic, dangerous electrical currents in the houses. It took months for the residents to be believed, and finally the power plant was shut down as the cause, according to the company, was complex and, quote, involved many systems, unquote. The plant is visible to neighbors in spite of it being part of the contract that it would not be. Then we have Shutesbury. The Wheelock power plant involved clear cutting. The company is long gone and they failed to file their annual reports. The Shutesbury Conservation Commission reported many problems, including flooding basements, erosion, water pollution, failure to complete required environmental protection measures, failure to ensure pollinator meadow as promised, failure to plant erosion preventing vegetation as agreed, failure to remove equipment as agreed, and stagnant water where it was not meant to be. And then there are the Pine Barrens disaster in Southeast Massachusetts. With these companies, disaster and mishandling, it's the rule, not the exception. And we can look in our own region to see this. I could not find a clear-cut site in Massachusetts that did not have terrible issues. We can't play questionable math games about our solar commitment that ignores these realities and the many benefits our forests provide on behalf of our climate. We have to protect our towns. Though I'm not sure a moratorium can stop this huge corporate machine, I know that taking our time to consider what is truly best for our town and the climate is imperative to give us a chance to build solar the smart way. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Adam Fink, please enter the room, state your name and where you live.
Hello, my name is Adam Fink. I live in 16 Adams Street in East Amherst, and I'm here today in support of a resolution protecting adult access to plant medicine and prioritizing public health responses to controlled substance possession. 4 other towns in Massachusetts have passed similar resolutions, including Northampton, East Hampton, Cambridge, and Somerville. This reflects a growing shift in sensible drug policies that see plant medicines and other substances as holding tremendous therapeutic and medicinal value when used safely and responsibly. I have personally had my life changed immeasurably by the therapeutic use of plant medicines. I had a long history of mental health struggle and depression. After years of prescription medication that only served to numb my symptoms, I had an experience on psychedelic plant medicine that enabled me to better understand my condition and empowered me to live a productive, joyous, and engaged life. My story is shared by thousands of other citizens in the community and in the globe at large. However, psychedelic plant medicine is currently deemed as an illegal Class 1 substance, and people with these experiences are currently brought into jails and other institutions that do not seek to heal them, but to continue patterns of harm. I'm here today to advocate for a more sensible drug policy that sees the holistic power of these natural medicines that have been used for thousands of years have been researched and studied to be shown to be safe when taken effectively. And yes, thank you for your time. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you for joining us, Adam. Adam Clem. Enter the room and state your name and where you live.
Hi, my name is Adam Clem, and I'm an Amherst citizen located at 171 Orchard Hill Drive. And like my friend who just spoke, Adam Fink, I am here voicing my support for for a resolution protecting adult access to plant medicines and prioritizing public health responses to controlled substance possession. This resolution has, as my friend Adam Fink said, already been passed unanimously in 4 Massachusetts towns: East Hampton, Northampton, Cambridge, and Somerville. And this resolution seeks to move our mental health services towards greater compassion rather than punishment and criminality for those who use substances. I have also had my life changed by access to psychedelic plants and have been able to work through childhood trauma such as loss, which has led to depression, anxiety, and a lot of disconnect. And ultimately, these experiences have allowed me to reconnect and pursue what I hope to be my career as a psychotherapist. And just with that as a segue, there are tons of research studies which are now showing the remarkable effect of psychedelic medicines to heal post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, end-of-life anxiety. And these are results unlike any other current treatment available for mental health. Just to list a few statistics, 1 to 3, in the 2020 meta-analysis, it was found that 1 to 3 psilocybin mushroom experiences put 1 in 2 depression patients into remission. This is simply a result unlike anything we have ever seen in terms of mental health treatment. And also 1 to 3 psychedelic experiences have also shown a 40 to 50% reduced risk of opioid abuse. These are really exactly what we need in the face of the current mental health crisis that Massachusetts faces. And ultimately, we can hope to move our system towards greater compassion instead of punishment for those who use substances and struggle with mental illness. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you, Adam. Lenore Brick, please enter the room, state your name, and where you live.
Hi, everybody. Lenore Brick, 255 Strong Street. I won't repeat what everyone has said before me, but I will ask us to please not lose our focus. If this really is about climate and this really is about healing the planet and our public health, then it's not just about legalities and bylaws and zoning and state subsidies and all the stuff that we get caught up in. And if it really is about us wanting to do our fair share, then we need to understand that it's not just about fossil fuel emissions, that it's also about the healing nature that we have destroyed. The forests, the deforestation, industrial agriculture, resource extraction, land and water abuse, that all has as much to do with climate and biodiversity collapse as fossil fuel emissions. And any climate scientist worth their salt today that's doing the cutting edge climate science knows this. I sent an educational packet to all of you. I hope you've seen it. I'd be really interested in having a dialogue with each and every one of you, because these 2 to 3 minute public comments just doesn't cut it. We need to talk. We need to have question and answers. We need to bring in experts. There's a lot to understand here. And so I'm asking on behalf of our community, our state, our planet, that we're smart about this and that we learn from nature how to do this, and that we don't make assumptions. There's an assumption about the carbon accumulation benefits of solar versus forests, which is really hard to quantify, even with a familiarity of ecosystem carbon assessment. If you look at the packet that I gave you, the PFPI report, the climate scientists that understand forest ecology, Those analyses don't include ecosystem carbon loss from clear cutting and soil disturbance. They don't include that soil carbon constitutes more than 50 to 60% of ecosystem carbon. It doesn't include the climate mitigation capacities of soil structure and retention that's lost when we clear cut, the flooding and drought climate mitigation. And there's an assumption of substitution that fossil generation will cease with solar generation, even if consumer use and regulations don't change, which is ridiculous. And most importantly, there's an underlying concept that valuing forests only as a carbon sink, which is just absurdly flawed. There's so much to learn here, and these assumptions need to be challenged. And I hope that we can continue to have this dialogue and to get more answers as we ask more experts. And I will be happy to keep doing that research to bring it to you. And I really appreciate this very hard work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenore. John Reef, please enter the room. And please correct my pronunciation of your name if I was incorrect.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm John Reif, so thanks for that opportunity to get my name straight. I live at 3 Amherst Road in Pelham, so I'm your neighbor, 2 houses outside of the town line. And I buy and drink Amherst municipal water. So I have a stake in the decisions that are made that impact our shared water sources. I won't repeat the powerful things that have already been said about the impact of forest removal on water quality, but that's one of the reasons why I'm here tonight. I'm concerned about what could happen and what does sometimes happen to the water that we all depend on. I also would like to raise a point for your consideration, and you can tell by now I am speaking in behalf of the moratorium, temporary moratorium on large-scale ground-based solar. I think solar is a really, really important technology, and we need a lot of it. And it is only one of several renewable methods for producing electricity. So we need to be thinking about the whole spectrum of renewable electricity sources, not only solar. But producing electricity is only part of the picture, because we could also be looking at how we use electricity and whether we could increase the efficiency of the methods that we use electricity for, and therefore reduce how much electricity we need. If we're more efficient, we don't need as much. If we're more efficient, we don't need 300 acres. Our fair share might be 100 acres or some other number. A moratorium would provide time to figure out a lot more of this. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, John. Laura Drucker, please enter the room, state your name and where you live.
Hi, Laura Drucker. I'm in District 2. I'm the chair of the Energy and Climate Action Committee. I sent you all a public comment earlier, so I won't read that, but I wanted to come in and just correct something that was stated earlier. To clarify, neither Steve Roof nor ECAC have proposed that we determine our share of ground-mounted solar based on population. This was a calculation that was mentioned in a presentation, but it was included more recently in a letter that ECAC sent to the council. And that calculation was just an example. There was also another calculation included as an example based on energy use, as Michael wrongfully said we did not do. Energy use without including the higher ed institutions resulted in 270 acres. Energy use with the higher ed institutions resulted in 400 acres. Again, those are all just examples. None of those are final calculations. But to say that within the range of 250 to 400, we have 2 examples that show that range of acres that we might need to figure out how to put solar on in the most appropriate way. So I just wanted to clarify that. ECAC's letter talks about the need for a solar study, and in that solar study is where we would actually sort of figure out some scenarios we would run to figure out the acreage. We're not going to come up with one formula. It's going to need to be a scenario of a low and a high amount of acreage that we'll consider. But I just wanted to clarify that because I don't want that misinformation to be continued to be spread. Thank you.
Laura, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your work as chair of ECAC. That concludes public comment for this evening. We are going to move to the consent agenda. It is very brief, and we'll show it on the screen. The following items were selected because they were considered to be routine. And if you would like to have an item removed, please tell me that after I read the initial motion before I seek a second. To move the following items in the printed motions thereunder and approve those items as a single unit. Suspension of Town Council Rules of Procedure 8.4 for the following agenda items. Reminding you, this just allows us to vote this evening. It does not approve these items. That comes later. 8.B.1 Appropriation and Transfer Order FY 22-05D, an order appropriating funds for the Town of Amherst Capital Program, additional funding for the fire pumper truck. 8.B.2 Appropriation and Transfer Order FY 22-05E, an order appropriating funds for the Town of Amherst Capital Program, additional funding for the elementary school feasibility study. 9, approval of town manager appointments for the Board of License Commissioners. And 11, approval of minutes, January 24, 2022, regular town council meeting minutes. Are there any, hold on, I need to just adjust my screen. Are there any items that people would like removed? Seeing none, I seek a second.
Miller, second.
Thank you. I will, unless there's questions, I will then move to the vote. I'll begin with Anna Devlin Gauthier.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. Mindy Johannicki.
Aye.
Anika Lopes.
Aye.
Michelle Miller.
Yes.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Andy Steinberg is absent. Jennifer Taub.
Yes.
Alicia Walker.
Aye.
Shalini Balmilne.
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
It is unanimous, 12 in favor and 1 person absent. We have no resolutions and proclamations. So we are going to Sean with us and ready to go because we're a little ahead of schedule, but let's go for it. Sean, we're up to the financial appropriations. These were the topic of our public forum tonight. And we're going to show you the actual memo and the detail behind it and ask Kathy Shane on behalf of the Finance Committee to share with us their recommendation.
Thank you, Lynn. You're calling on me at this point? Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes. The Finance Committee, as you see in the report, voted unanimously to recommend to the council that they approve both appropriations. We talked a bit in the report about the need for them, and Sean did an excellent job earlier explaining it. One thing I might say about the school study appropriation is that it also includes some elements that, should we want to go with a particular form of bidding that's a construction manager at risk, there's a contingency fee. So it's possible not all this money will be used, but it's a best guess at the high end of this, and it's really essential for this phase. So the discussion went on about this, and there was basically no opposition. It was unanimous, including the 3 non-voting members of the committee.
And regarding the fire equipment, I want to just note that we have Chief Nelson and Deputy Chief Strongen. Excuse me, I'm tongue-tied tonight. Anybody have any questions on the school? Anybody have any questions on the fire equipment? Dorothy.
I just want to say that the explanation for these in the finance report were very concise and clear. And I guess maybe I wish you'd read them for the hearing that nobody said anything at the beginning, because they really stated the positive reason why we wanted to do these things.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment or questions? Okay, then we have to do these as two separate motions. I will begin with the first one, and that is in accordance with Charter Section 5.6, having been published on the Town Bulletin Board for a minimum of 10 days on January 27th, 2022, a public forum held on February 2nd, 2020. A public forum held on February 7th, 2022, and having been reviewed and recommended by the Finance Committee report of February 2nd, 2022, to adopt appropriation and transfer order FY 22-05D, an order appropriating funds for the Town of Amherst capital program, additional funding for the fire pumper truck as shown on page 5 of the motions sheet. Is there a second?
Second, DeAngelis.
I'd say we have a lot of seconds there. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to move to a vote. Griesmer is aye. Mandy Jo?
Aye.
Anika Lopes?
Aye.
Michelle Miller?
Yes.
Dorothy Pam?
Yes.
Pam Rooney?
Aye.
Kathy Shane?
Yes.
Andy Steinberg is absent. Jennifer Taub?
Yes.
Alicia Walker?
Aye.
Shalini Bowman?
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis?
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Great choices, gentlemen. I appreciate the technology you're investing in that one. We're going to move on then to the next one, which is in accordance with Charter Section 5.6, having been published on the Town Bulletin Board for a minimum of 10 days on January 27th, 2022, and a public forum held on February 7th, 2022, and having been reviewed and recommended by the Finance Committee report of February 2nd, 2022, to adopt appropriation and transfer order FY 22-05E, an order appropriating funds for the Town of Amherst capital program, additional funding for the elementary school feasibility study as shown on page 6 of the motion sheet. Is there a second?
Second, Devlin Gothier.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, then we move to Mandy Jo Haneke.
Aye.
Anika Lopes.
Aye.
Michelle Miller.
Yes.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Steinberg is absent. Jennifer Taub.
Yes.
Alicia Walker.
Yes.
Shalini Bowman.
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
Yes.
And Lynn Griesmer is an aye, and that is unanimous with one absent. Thank you, Sean. Enjoy, and Sonia, I think you're still here. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Okay. Since we started a little earlier and the next item might take a little longer, I am going to suggest we take a 5-minute break and reconvene at 7:35. Okay. Please mute, turn your video off, turn it back on when you come back on. As you return, please put your video back on so I know you're back. As you return, please put your video on so I know you're back. And if you've returned, please put your video back on so I know you're back. Alicia, if you're back, please put your video back on, please, so I know you're back. Great. I actually told people who would be coming from the planning board, planning department, and so forth, that we would not take up the moratorium item until 8 o'clock. And so I'm just going to skip, actually go back to something that we skipped earlier and just talk briefly, mostly for the purposes of the audience, that we have a retreat planned this Saturday. It is this council's first retreat, and a couple, basically an agenda that includes the following. An icebreaker, we just spend a little more time getting to know each other. A discussion of our values and how we communicate and demonstrate those values. A discussion of our priorities with an example of working through a priority in terms of the process that we use to actually make decisions as a council. And then time permitting, we also will spend some time talking about areas where we might like to have working sessions that would be held from like 5:30 to 6:30 on council nights, but also talk about other items that come up for us as counselors, mostly working with our constituents and how we handle them. I've been in the process of polling the council, and with Shalini and Anna Devon-Gauthier's assistance, we interviewed a couple of facilitators, and Erin Cohn is going to be our facilitator. She's presently at Smith, but prior to that was with a consulting company. And we've had 2 meetings with her, and we have 1 more in preparation for the retreat. Are there questions at this time from the council? We will meet starting at 9. The room will be in a very large U, if you will, so that we can spread out, and we will be wearing masks. And we do ask if you think you might be having been exposed, that perhaps you reconsider and attend virtually, which we can accommodate, but we certainly urge people to be there. We will provide lunch, but you'll spread out separately throughout the building and not eat together in the same room, unless you choose to make that decision. And we hope to finish not too long after 2, at the latest 3, because I also want to mention that Anika Lopes and her mother, representing their family, is being honored by the Amherst Historical Society with the Conch Shell Award, and that's at 2:00 on Saturday, for the work that they have done to make sure that those beautiful tablets are now restored and on display at the Bang Center. And so we want to congratulate Anika and her mother and her whole family. And if we can finish in time, we'd like to join and see her receive that award. So that's what the agenda of the day looks like. Okay. Still not seeing some other people. So believe it or not, I'm going to go on to committee reports. Okay. First one, Community Resources Committee, Mandy Jo.
Well, you'll hear, or you had the report about the temporary moratorium in your packet, so I won't talk about that. We'll say that when we get to that. But we had a good meeting talking about the transition memo and some capacity availability at the planning department, zoning priorities, conversation topics, and the like. That conversation will continue at the next meeting. A written report will be drafted to summarize that in more detail for the next council meeting that will include both conversations from both the February 3rd meeting and the February 24th meeting. And we will also be hopefully discussing the implementation of the comprehensive housing policy at the next meeting.
Okay. Kathy, Elementary School Building Committee.
I'm just unmuting. A couple of meetings are coming up that may be of interest. One is tomorrow night, the school committee will be meeting, and they have the draft education plan. Denisko really worked hard with Mike and his staff, and there's the first look at the dimensions of the building, and these are probably maximum dimensions, so we expect those will change over time, but that's necessary for them to do rough probable cost estimates of different approaches in terms of whether building a new building and what net zero would cost, a net zero building would cost with an ad reno. So that is tomorrow night, and the school committee meets from 6:30 to 9. Those materials are posted. So if you want to read what was submitted, but don't have time to go to the meeting, on the 10th, February 10th at 9:30 in the morning is the second meeting of the building committee's net zero subcommittee. And at this meeting, we will be talking about a potential EUI, energy use intensity target, and going over again the pathway to net zero with some information about the sites and the building conditions. And those site and building conditions were presented to the building committee with some detail last week. So we will be also posting them. I'm working with town staff to get a way to post net zero materials, but the site information was in the committee's report. At the next council meeting, which is 2 weeks from now, correct, Lynn? 3 weeks. We will have more information and be getting toward this first submission to the granting authority. We won't be at final, but more information on the range of cost estimates for potential options and a package. So you can stay tuned for that. And we meet on Friday mornings at 8:30 in the morning. So that won't be posted yet, but from what the cost estimates look like, we're moving that. And just so everyone understands, this is not to make a decision. It's a set of materials that goes into MSBA, the granting authority, on the range of things we will be considering. And then the decision on moving from a range of options to a preferred option will be made somewhere between March and June. That's the next step. So this is not decision-making, but it's informing a potential decision down the road.
Okay. Alicia, did you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to urge you all as counselors to take a look at the preliminary space summary that we've received, which also should be available to view, because it looks like that right now we are being proposed a project of an estimated 114,000 square feet, which would roughly be about a $93 million project. And so I just urge you all to really go over that document carefully and to be thinking about those things within the next couple of weeks.
And just that is the document that I talked about was posted. It goes with the education plan. And just so you know, that's how much square footage MSBA would be willing to pay for based on the children we're putting in the program. That is not at all the estimate of how much square footage will be in the building. The committee will be looking hard at those, Alicia, on as will the school committee, in terms of what are the cost implications of that space. So stay tuned on what the size of the building will be.
And Pam Rooney, you have your hand up. Was that to ask a question of these elementary school people?
Yeah,
Thank you. Go ahead.
Same topic. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I took a quick look at it. It's along the lines of what I used to do at UMass. So I was very interested in some of the square footage, and it's very interesting to kind of look at the numbers. And I would echo what Alicia just said, that take a look at the numbers, because I was struck by what MSBA sort of recommended as opposed to what was being proposed. And there's twice as much special ed space, for instance, in what's being proposed as what was recommended by MSBA. And again, if it is the kind of square footage, it struck me that it was significantly a larger facility being proposed than what MSBA sort of recommended for the number of students that we're doing. So I had the question, wondered if somebody could answer that. Does MSBA come forward and say, we're going to give you X number of millions of dollars, that's it, everything that you want above that is your cost? How does that work, Kathy?
If we go above recommended square footage for specific use, it's on our dime. There are leeways on special needs, and DESE gets involved on the special needs students. And so if those get endorsed, but I want to emphasize these are not likely to be the final numbers we're going forward with, either Pam or Alicia. We have not, as a building committee, seen these yet. They had to go in with the education plan because there is a fit with what's being discussed there. So I expect that will be a topic for our next meeting and the next couple meetings. It creates a range. So yes, and there are leeways on, how much you need. Up to a certain amount, you can go lower. For some of the classrooms, we can't go lower than a certain amount for students. But others, there are ranges.
Okay. Dorothy?
I got a little confused in listening to that. Is it that the MSBA proposes a lower number of square feet than what the committee is proposing, or is it vice versa?
The committee, for starters, the committee has not proposed anything yet. Okay, I just want to this is coming to the committee. It went to the school committee to go with an education plan. So they will allow so much art room space for 575. You can have up to 2 classrooms of art, up to 2 of music. They will allow certain other features. They will allow some breakout spaces. Those are not required space. You have to have required space for, if you have a kindergarten class, it can't be any smaller than a certain amount for the children. So there's some that are allowable in terms of MSBA flexibility, other things not. They wouldn't, for example, pay for an auditorium. It wouldn't be on the list for an elementary school. They will consider a cafetorium, which is a cafeteria with a stage in it. So there's that kind of range, and how big that's going to be. It has to be a minimum size for the number of children, but the size of the stage is something we can be talking to with the designers. So these are not final numbers at all. And Alicia, everyone should know they're coming in higher than we had originally thought.
I believe Alicia wanted to add something to that, Kathy. Go ahead, Alicia.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify my statement because I guess it was a little confusing. So the MSBA recommended 85,000 K feet, and our estimate is coming in at 114,000 square feet. And there are certain requirements, like Kathy was explaining, and 2 art rooms is one of them. However, in the proposed document, we're actually only proposing 1, and their recommendation was to propose 2. So I'm just requesting that we all look at it very carefully. I know we're not in the final stages, but I think that this is the time to look at it with like a very clear eye. And that also the MSBA guidelines, and this is just my understanding of it, is that they will fund 50%, like it's a percentage of the project that they will fund if we meet their suggested requirements. And if we go above that, then that percentage changes and it may go lower. And then we also are responsible for covering the extra amount as well.
That's correct. Thank you both. Jennifer, did you have a question?
Yeah, just I wanted to ask, is there a budget within which we work, or is it's fluid at this point?
It's, and Paul can respond also. When we were working with Sean back when we were talking about all the projects, we had a rough estimate of what we thought our share of the school would cost. And that's been penciled into a financing plan. And it was around a building with about 10,000 fewer square feet than the 115,000 square feet. And just, you need to look at the spreadsheet because there's some variations in there, including not all of that space adds up to 114. There's something called a remainder that I'm not sure what it is because I haven't had a chance to talk to the designer yet. It doesn't go with this classroom and that classroom. So they've allowed some leeway. But so Jennifer, we do have a number penciled in for the town share. The town share depends on what space MSBA is willing to pay for. It's also what they're willing to pay for, so that we're, one of the things as this is getting clearer, and I can put this all in writing so it's not just a long piece, is when we do site work, which would include if we're considering geothermal and we're digging underneath to put the geothermal in, they cap the amount they will pay for site work as a percent of construction costs. They don't say if you need to do that, it's covered. So far, they're not covering photovoltaic PV, even though they're conducting seminars on net zero schools and advocating it. So that's not, so it's an eligible cost versus an, so there's some pieces that when you go to them, you get extra points if you're a green school though. So there are extra points if part of your building is renovated as opposed to all new, but you only get those on the part that's renovated and those costs. So there's a series of what exactly they will pay for is both a combination of what you submit and not going over their allowables, as Alicia said, they won't pay for that, but then even the rest of it will be down the road. We will get a good idea of that once we go to schematic design and in the fall, but before that, we will have narrowed down what we were going to them for.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that this is going to be the topic of a serious topic on future council meetings and particularly around the financing. So we'll have more opportunity then. And I'm also going to suggest that we pause here on the community and liaison reports. And Chris, I just wanted to ask, was Rob Moreau going to join you today or not?
He is planning to join us, but I think he thought he wouldn't be coming in till 8:10. But
I see.
Yeah, when I spoke with him today, he said he would join us.
So let me take one more. Kathy, briefly talk about Finance Committee besides the appropriations.
You mean on what's tomorrow?
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee meeting tomorrow at 9 in the morning. The Finance Committee will be taking up several items. They're all in the packets now. The one that will take up the most time is we will be looking at the Community Preservation Act proposed list of projects to support and discussing those projects. We also will have this first and second quarter financial report on revenues and expenditures and how they've come in versus what we budgeted, and an updated budget that came out of the BCG, the Budget Coordinating Committee meeting. So there's a set of materials in the finance packet, but the one that I think you all have been invited to, if you want to hear the presentation on the CPAC proposals, that will be presented tomorrow, where we will be looking at each of the projects they proposed.
That is a committee of the whole, so that you as counselors are invited to, even if you're not on the finance committee, you're invited to attend. During that period of the meeting, you will be full panelists and have all the rights and responsibilities of being a full panelist. It'll also be taped for those of you who are not able to be there, because when we actually bring this to the council, we will not have nearly as extensive a presentation. However, at some point, we do have to have a public forum. Okay, so let me actually, then I'm still waiting for Rob. He's just arrived. So I'm going to pause at that point. And when we come back, we'll do the other committees. First of all, Chris, Rob, and Doug Marshall, thank you for joining us. And we actually got a few other pieces of business done. We're going to start. This is the first reading. There will be no action. And in fact, we will not even do amendments tonight, though people may discuss ideas. This is the first reading of the proposed zoning Article 16 temporary moratorium on the permitting and approval of large-scale ground-mounted solar energy systems, including photovoltaic installations. The sponsors are Pat DeAngelis, Anna Devlin Gothier, and myself. And we're going to start with a brief sponsor presentation. Anna?
Sure, thanks, Athena. So just to preview this, I know a lot of you are on CRC, and I believe most of you are at CRC when we talked through this then, but I'm going to just run through this presentation really briefly to try to give you an overview of what this temporary moratorium is supposed to do and why we, the sponsors, believe that it is a benefit to the town at this point. So Athena, you can go to the next one. Yeah, so one of the things that we want to acknowledge, and I think it's really important to kind of decouple a couple of things. The first is that what we are asking for is a temporary pause that would allow us to create a working group to draft a bylaw and to conduct a solar siting study. There are three really important steps that need to happen here. And we are saying that that process is temporary moratorium, solar siting study, and then kind of starting to overlap on the siting study. There are some elements that can happen at the same time, is bylaw creation for the regulation of large-scale ground mount solar. Large-scale ground mount solar at this point is done through Article 3 of the zoning bylaw, which allows for site plan review or special permit through ZBA, neither of which offer the security and protection of a bylaw that is specifically addressing this type of installation and the unique components of it. So when we think about things that are really important when we talk about, and I know we saw this in one of the public comments, we saw folks talking about things like fence height off the ground, right, for wildlife. There are no specific provisions for some components of large-scale solar that are unique to large-scale solar, right? So a bylaw helps us to address those components. We also need to do a solar siting study. That is such a critical component of this, and I'm very grateful that that has come to the forefront as a need and that it's being supported and really driven by our town staff. Especially, I want to shout out Stephanie Ciccarello for her work on that. We don't know what our siting and consumption needs are. You heard it in public comment. There are lots of different equations that are being used. You know, we really need to get a handle on what our usage is, how we're going to work with our local institutions of higher ed to support this, and then what our landscape is in terms of where these large scale installations could go. A lot of folks reference the Conservation Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals when they talk about the need for just skipping the moratorium and going right into bylaw drafting. To be clear, we are working on that, getting that working group to draft the bylaw going. There's not a pause on that. That's still moving forward. The temporary moratorium allows us to pause the permitting until that bylaw is crafted, because groups like the Conservation Commission are limited in their scope, right? Concom essentially is restricted to anything wet. That's kind of the easiest way to, that's a very simplistic way. So if anyone in the audience is on Concom, know that I'm being very simplistic. And then ZBA is also, you know, we don't have a set of guidelines for them to look through and confirm, right? So there aren't those specific needs for them to examine in permitting these arrays. So we really want to make sure that those are being considered as future arrays go up. It's also worth noting, up until now, the largest array that has been proposed and is currently being built is on Hickory Ridge, which is roughly 26 acres. When you look at the potential for future solar arrays, we've seen things that are almost double that in terms of the clearing that would happen, right? Or the land they would take up. I shouldn't say clearing, because we're not necessarily going to get into that specific component, but the actual array size, right? We're missing specific needs pertaining to large-scale ground mount solar, such as wildlife accommodations, impact on personal wells, but also decommissioning. The solar arrays have a lifespan of approximately 20 to 25 years. We need to make sure our bylaw addresses what to do when that lifespan is up. Bylaw development is imminent, but it takes time, right? At this point, the sponsors are all very happy that we will get a bylaw. We will have a solar bylaw. However, as we have seen with Counsel and with our processes, it takes time to do that. And now that folks, you know, it's public knowledge that we're developing that bylaw, we really want to make sure that we are holding everyone to the same standard and that we're equitably applying that standard going forward. And then lastly, a temporary moratorium is not a random strategy that we plucked out of nowhere, right? This is something that we have seen other towns do successfully while they are drafting their own solar bylaws. And it's something that's even specifically mentioned by the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission in their report on considerations for developing a solar bylaw. This is temporary. Athena, next slide, please. So what this allows us to do, enacting this temporary moratorium would allow us to equitably apply a solar bylaw there are currently no large scale ground mount solar projects before any of the boards that would see one. A temporary moratorium allows us to equitably apply this future bylaw and limit projects from rushing in to freeze their zoning before it's passed. It also offers us protection from potential litigation. Developing a bylaw, which is again equitably applied, will protect both the town of Amherst and the solar developers themselves from litigation stemming from inconsistently applied regulation and parameters. This temporary moratorium allows us, and this for me, this is in my mind the most important one, it allows us to conduct a solar siting study and create a bylaw without that inherent risk. We need a clear understanding of where solar could potentially go. We know we need a lot of solar. We have a responsibility to do this part in terms of our energy needs. We need to conduct a solar siting study and use those results in crafting a solar bylaw. And then lastly, a temporary moratorium allows us to mitigate risks associated with the unknowns of large-scale ground mount solar until we have that bylaw. We've seen, some were referenced today, we have seen other environmental issues stemming from large-scale ground mount solar installations in towns like Orange, Brookfield, Williamsburg. Without that regulation and policy specific to large-scale ground mount installations, we're not able to regulate and mitigate the potential causes of those incidents in Amherst, and we'd like to do that. Next slide, please. Thank you. So there's also a little bit of misinformation about a temporary moratorium that I would love to clear up. What a temporary moratorium does not do, and I'd like to thank Chris for more clarity on this recently as well, temporary moratorium does not actually stop solar developers from beginning other stages of their process. So getting a large scale array takes multiple steps and will go through multiple boards in order to get permitted. This temporary moratorium pauses submissions to the Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals. Those developers can still start their processes with the Conservation Commission, doing things like area resource delineation, as well as a notice of intent. And this is a shift for those of you who are on CRC. We have further clarity on this, that they can actually submit their applications to Concom, not just do the last time we just talked about the ANRAD. They can actually start moving through that process with plans. It does not limit future solar development in Amherst. A solar bylaw will actually support future development of solar of Amherst, which we need in order to meet our needs and move away from fossil fuels. Once there's a bylaw in place, we will be able to intentionally regulate where and how large-scale ground mount solar is installed and ensure that it's aligned with our needs and our environmental, personal health and safety. And then lastly, this does not stop any personal residential solar installations or ongoing solar projects. This moratorium is limited to projects over 250 kilowatts. And so just to clarify, because there were questions about this on CRC, that is the definition of large scale ground mount from the Department of, from DOER. And it does not apply to projects which have already been approved. So this would not stop Hickory Ridge. It does not stop the development of solar, which is almost done. I think, Chris, is it almost turned on in South Amherst as well? And I think that was it for my slides. So yeah, so just to kind of sum this up, the goal of the temporary moratorium is to allow us to draft a bylaw and conduct a solar siting study without projects rushing in before those are done. We need a lot of solar. We need to limit our reliance on fossil fuels, and solar is a very promising way to do that in the Valley. We also need to make sure that we are being intelligent in how we are regulating this and how we are permitting it. And I will turn it back over to you, Lynn.
Pat, did you have anything else you'd like to add?
Not right now.
Okay, and neither do I. So I'm going to move on then to the planning board report. Doug Marshall, who's chair of the planning board, has joined us, and Chris Brestrup, who is our planning director, has joined us, as well as Rob Mora. So Doug, thanks for taking some time this evening.
Thank you, President Griesmer. The planning board considered the proposed solar moratorium at its December 1st and December 15th, 2021 meetings. Public comment was taken at both meetings. Our report on this proposal, dated January 26th, was received by the clerk of the council on February 4th, and I believe it was added to your meeting packets on that date. The report contains a comprehensive description of the board and staff discussions and public comments made in our meetings, both in support and in opposition. At its December 15th meeting, the board voted 5-2 in favor of a motion to not recommend this bylaw proposal to council. Since the vote was more than 2-1 against the motion, my summary this evening will focus on the majority view. The following 3 points summarize that view. First, several large ground-mounted solar arrays have been successfully permitted and constructed in Amherst under conditions imposed by the ZBA and subject to inspections by town staff. To date, these installations have not generated complaint, nor have they created unsafe or detrimental environmental conditions. For that reason, a majority of the board did not believe that our current process for permitting and constructing arrays is sufficiently flawed or inadequate to require a halt to the process for new arrays. Current risks seem low, and the ZBA is aware of the need to equitably apply conditions to projects. Second, a majority of the board believed that a moratorium would delay construction of additional large ground-mounted arrays in Amherst at a time when the science indicates that our species is running out of time to avoid catastrophic disruptions to human and natural systems. The majority of the board felt that the need for action is so urgent that the risks of allowing additional arrays to proceed under the current permitting are worth taking. The risks of inaction seemed greater than the risks of delay. Third, adoption of this proposal will send a public message that Amherst does not take the climate crisis seriously or welcome solar energy projects. Due to this proposal, Amherst has already been publicly cited in 2 instances. In one, as an example of NIMBY concerns obstructing progress on climate change, and in the other as an example of misunderstanding that weaning our society off of fossil fuel will require trade-offs that could be contrary to the traditional conservation mindset. Finally, and on a more positive note of agreement, the entire board agreed with the proposal's proponents, town staff, and many members of the public that a solar study should be conducted to assess town lands for their appropriateness for large ground-mounted installations, and that in conjunction with that study, the town should adopt a more definitive bylaw to regulate these arrays. To that end, the board has begun educating itself on this subject by reviewing the bylaws of other towns, and at its last meeting, it began discussing their features. In short, the board is moving with deliberate speed to support the town's development of a new bylaw, and we stand ready to participate going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Chris, did you have anything else to add to the planning director's report? I mean, the planning board chair's report.
I don't really have anything to add, although I certainly agree with everything Doug said. And we are very happy and excited about working on a solar bylaw and a solar siting study. So we're launching into that, with great vigor. And I don't really have anything to add to Doug's statements. Thank you.
Okay. Then we're going to move on to the Community Resources Committee report. Mandy Jo?
Thank you. The report is in the packet. I did my best to summarize the public hearing that lasted about a little over 2.5 hours, I believe, on January 10th. And then the deliberation happened on January 27th. After that deliberation, the CRC voted unanimously to recommend the town council adopt the bylaw. During that meeting and deliberation, the bylaw language was amended and was then forwarded to GOL.
Okay. And GOL, Michelle Miller.
We had a good conversation in consultation with the sponsors, and we voted unanimously to, as amended. So we made some amendments, which you can see in the packet. And we voted unanimously to declare clear, consistent, and actionable.
Okay. And that was subsequent to a review by legal counsel.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. All right. I think at this point, what we want to do is move to council questions and discussion. Shalini Baumel.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I had 2 concerns, and I was in conflict in the CRC meeting, and there were 2 main questions that I was concerned about. One was what are the unintended consequences of an 18-month moratorium? And that has been my question all along. And the second one was, what do we have in place right now to ensure that we can make thoughtful decisions about large-scale solar while we write the solar bylaw and do the siting study? So I understand that there is, so I'm not going to repeat any of the things that we've said in the past, but I've collected additional information about these 2 aspects that are really important. One is, what are the unintended consequences of the 18-month moratorium? So let me just go with that. We got an email today from the Energy Transition Institute, and this is made up by a very diverse group of people, including an economics professor who studies environmental justice, Erin Baker, who works with sustainable and equitable energy systems, Brian Yellen, who studies hydrology and stormwater management, Anna Goldstein, who is a research professor of environmental conservation. So in their letter to the town council and the public comment, they shared 3 facts that are really critical to how the moratorium negatively impacts our climate action goals. The first thing they said was that that not putting in, let's say, a 10 megawatt solar plant is equivalent to having 750 cars idling. So it's like we're allowing 750 cars to just be out there emitting carbon emissions. That's what not having the solar panels or the 10 megawatt means. The second thing is that it creates 5,400 megawatts increase in natural gas consumption. So 46%, okay, I'm going too many numbers, but the basic idea is that not having the 10 megawatt solar plant would basically have 3,500 tons of carbon dioxide CO2 emissions per year every year. So there's like, anyway, all of these numbers are there in the letter that we received that tells us the urgency and the damage that it does. The second thing they talked about was natural gas, how it's actually, the 10 megawatt would displace 5,400 megawatts of natural gas consumption per year. And the other thing the other information that we've been struggling with is, but what do we do if we don't have enough processes in place? And what I found out is that Section 53G in the state law allows committees to hire an independent consultant that is paid for by the solar company to do an assessment. So yes, the zoning, the ZBA can hire an independent consultant to find out if any project that we get, and the solar company will have to pay the money for that to find out whether this place is okay with respect to soil or water or any of those things. So we have that in place. There is a decommission fund that is set up ahead of time. There's been concern about like, oh, we don't know what will happen with the decommissioning. There is a fund that's set up in place ahead of time to make sure that even if the company goes bankrupt, that money can be used to bring back that place into a natural state. The third thing is the way these large scale projects are done, they're not done 40 acres in one go. Let's say we're thinking 40 acres. They phase it out. So they do 10 acres at a time, wait for it to be stabilized, and then continue. So everything is done in a very thoughtful way because the companies have learned from the mistakes that other companies made. Nobody wants to be sued for millions of dollars like Williamsburg Dynamo Company had to be. So most of the companies that are now working, at least with the town of Amherst, are very concerned about doing this in the right way. And the last thing is that I spoke with Todd Holland, who supervised the Hampshire College solar project, and he said that Hampshire College has an amazing blueprint, and they're still continuing to study the impact of large-scale solar. So we don't have to, we have all these resources in place to make sure that we're doing this project by project in a very thoughtful way while we're writing the bylaw, and we don't need to stop. That's all I'll say for now.
Thank you. I have asked that we bring the clock up, which is part of our rules. Pam Rooney?
I'll keep it quick. I actually heard tonight someone in the public had mentioned something about a concern about some of the wording that the CRC added to the preamble, and that had to do with the fact that there's expectation for hundreds of acres of solar array that may end up being Amherst's share of contribution. And I think probably next round when we come back and start looking at any kind of amendment, I think I might just add a very simple word, which is in one of the sentences, it's like the town has established rigorous climate goals. We need to do our part by permitting. And I would just say maybe on potentially hundreds of acres of land in the town. So it doesn't lock us into hundreds of acres of land, but it will become apparent to us what we may need to produce. So I think the word potentially modifies that a little bit. Thank you.
Mandy Jo?
Yes, thank you. So my vote on January 27th was to recommend passage of this bylaw. Since that time, we've received more information and I've continued to think about the bylaw. And so right now I wanted to be entirely open and say I'm leaning heavily towards not voting for passage of this bylaw for particularly two reasons. On February 3rd, CRC was notified during our general conversations that some preliminary subdivision plans have been filed that will freeze zoning for at least 4 parcels in Amherst. That means for those parcels, no temporary moratorium, even if enacted, would apply. And frankly, the solar siting would not apply either if that continues to go through. So that means that if this moratorium is adopted, we would allow solar development on generally our first choice, the impervious surfaces, but we would stop development on what would be my second choice, potentially cleared land, farmland or pasture land. But then we would stop it there, but then potentially have to allow it on forested land. And that seems unwise to stop development temporarily, even on lands that might be more preferable to have large-scale ground mount solar than on other lands that have had the preliminary subdivision plans filed. And then the other reason is one of the reasons I could vote to recommend it a week ago was in my mind because of these potential preliminary subdivision plans, that in my mind, the ground effects probably wouldn't even be there, that the moratorium wouldn't have any effect at all on the ground in Amherst. But then I started reading some of the commentary that's been written about even a proposed moratorium. And I started realizing that as an elected official, it's not just what's on the ground in our local town that matters. It's the perception of our local town, especially a town, the perception of a town that has been seen as very progressive, very climate action forward, and if we adopt a moratorium, what it's telling our region, what it's telling our state, what it's telling our nation is that progressive Amherst does not believe that solar should happen even on a temporary basis, even if we do it later on. And that is not the message I want to be sending in this world when we've adopted aggressive climate action goals. I want to send a message that we recognize solar needs to be developed quickly, rapidly, in order to save the trees that are in our town in the long run. Because if we don't, as a nation, town, community, do that now, we're going to lose the trees that we're talking about saving now. And so for those reasons, I'm heavily considering voting no for this.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
Unmute. All right. Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, to be honest, Amherst already isn't leading in this. We're already behind. We've given up on leading in this, and we gave up on leading in this over 5 years ago. So I mean, I think that one, I just want to acknowledge that that was missed. Two, one of my frustrations with that, well, not with that, but with this particular need for a temporary moratorium is that this should have been done 5 years ago. A bylaw should have been written 5 years ago. And so, but it should have been, and it wasn't. So now what do? We write a bylaw. In my mind, I think what's really important to note, and I would ask that all of you remember something very important about the wording of this, is that this is temporary. This is just, it is a maximum of 18 months. It does not necessarily need to be 18 months. And I would do everything that I can to encourage everyone who's involved in writing this bylaw to make it go faster. 18 months is the maximum. If we don't have a bylaw in 18 months, this expires and there's no bylaw. So that's an important note that I think, when we look at numbers and we look at calculations, which is good to do, that we're remembering that it's a maximum here. The other thing is, Shalini brought up some really great points about the resources that are available to ZBA. ZBA hasn't taken advantage of those in the past. And so I think it's important to note, or maybe they have, I saw you perk up, but I think it's important to note that there are questions ZBA could be asking, but they need to know to ask them. And we have a letter, I believe it's in your packet, from the chair of ZBA supporting this temporary moratorium because they don't feel like they have those supports in play. There are also, despite commitments from companies, there are not regulations in our zoning bylaw about decommissioning. And so it's important to note that while there's support out there for these companies to do this, it's important that we're backing it up with regulation and policy, which we're not currently doing. I also just, the last thing around this, the message that this sends, personally, I had a really hard time jumping on board. I consider myself an environmentalist. I believe deeply in solar energy, and I believe we need a lot of it. And so it was really hard for me to say that the first thing I was signing on with this new council was a temporary moratorium on solar. But having sat through some of the hearings in conservation, having watched some of these projects go through, I do deeply believe that we are not in a position to, that we need this bylaw, and that the risk that we are taking by not having it is higher than I think people are necessarily realizing. We're putting a lot of faith in our people, and our people are phenomenal, but they need the support of a bylaw. And until we have that bylaw, we're kind of leaving them out to dry a little bit there. So that's my rationale. I also just, I'm done. Time's up. I'm following the clock. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Anika.
Okay, so my questions are more about what would happen during the moratorium. I do agree, or understand rather, how this can sound like an off message from Amherst, but I say this without judgment. I have very close friends who work with Exxon, and but my questions are, what towns, Anna, you mentioned towns that have had successes during a moratorium on solar projects, and so my question was, which towns and what were the successes? And my other question is, considering that there are numerous ways to slow down projects, is a moratorium necessary in order to vet, for a project to be vetted rather? Is it based on one or two projects? Or is this more of a matter of current regulations maybe being deficient, or their efficiency being considered? And also, seeing as we're in a decade plan and this moratorium could take about a fifth of that time, what exactly in measurable action would happen during this time that would be healing or beneficial for the planet, and what is in place to kind of catch up for those 18 months?
Okay, I'm looking to see whether or not either Anna or Pat wants to jump in on any of those. Pat?
I'd like to wait a moment
Okay.
and then listen to what people are saying and then pull my thoughts together. I have some things I'd like to focus on, but.
Thank you. Okay. Michelle Miller.
Thank you. I have a little statement that I wrote that I need to get off my chest, and then I have a few questions. So something I reflect on a lot is how easy it is for me as a white woman living in a beautiful rural town like Amherst to be out of touch with the problems of the world. I work hard to bring myself closer to realities that exist outside of my lived experience. As a town councilor, it's even more important that I try to fully grasp what's at stake and what the impact of my decisions are. When it comes to the decision of whether to delay the possibility of solar or not, I've really struggled. Not because I don't believe the sponsors and proponents have made an excellent case for us to slow down, particularly given we are planning something new. Rather, because I worry how the privilege we have in Amherst to slow things down perpetuates a lens that does not recognize the urgent social, racial, and climate issues we are facing locally and worldwide. So that's my statement for right now. And I do have some questions, which I'm happy to send in an email later if they can't all be answered now. The first question is, what is the anticipated completion date of the solar siting study? And what measures does the survey assess? The second is, and I've already actually asked this to Sean, and he's already suggested that they would pull this together. So this question is, what was the FY22 revenue for solar, and what's the budgeted revenue for FY23? Do we have a sense of how many acres of solar we can accommodate when we consider public and private land? And the last question is, if it could be clarified what the ZBA has used currently with respect to guidelines on permitting projects to date. Thanks.
Okay, I think we're waiting to answer questions once we get them all. Jennifer?
Yes, thank you. The first, I did want to point out that we, in the last CRC meeting, one of the changes that we made in the language of the proposed moratorium and article bylaw was to put a specific date at which the moratorium had to end. And that is May 31st, 2023. So that's only about 15 months from now. And I would say at the point at which the bylaw, if it is approved and the moratorium were to begin, we'd probably be looking at about 14, I would say 14 to 15 months at the most, if it wasn't passed until late March or April. So we're the 18 months, that kind of clock ran out. I also feel like I have to say, I don't think in the wider world that anyone really doubts the town of Amherst fierce commitment to doing all we can to mitigate and reverse the impacts of climate change. I think we're known far and wide, to the extent that Amherst is known far and wide, as being passionate about protecting and doing all we can for the health of our environment. So I don't think by passing the moratorium, we're sending any kind of negative message to anybody. And there have been leaders in, because of all our institutions of higher learning. I mean, we have many representatives on ECAC and that are, on Smart Solar Amherst, and that have offered public comments at all of our, committee and board meetings, who are leaders in, internationally, nationally in their fields, who have urged us to take a pause on and support the moratorium as we draft the best bylaw that we can. So I feel like that we need to respond to that again, that we're not talking about 18 months, and that I think there's at least as many people in the field who think this is the responsible course of action, and not are going to look at us as being irresponsible, and sending the wrong message to the climate community. Thank you.
Okay. Dorothy?
Okay. I am absolutely, totally committed to renewable, non-fossil fuel, solar, and geothermal energy. I am absolutely committed. I'm also committed to water. I believe in preserving our water system and safe and clean water. So I support the moratorium. I hope that people will work in all due haste. I have trust. I do not think this moratorium is a way of slowing down and keeping and preventing. I really do believe that this moratorium is to make sure that we do it right and we do it better. So I do support the moratorium, and I hope that my assumptions are correct. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Kathy?
I'll just make a couple short ones from a world I used to live in, which was healthcare. One of the public comments tonight talked about the importance of regulations and standards, both for the developer as well as for the town, to ask our ZBA and the planning board to make individual decisions each time without guidelines is to ask them to go beyond standards and regulations. We know we can put a solar citing bylaw on the books. We have people working hard at it. I don't think we're going to go as long as even Jennifer's 12 months or 14 months. We just need to expedite that. And then you get clear guidelines. You don't get ZBA saying, well, we consider this, consider that. We don't know what's important. They negotiate out conditions. They're not informed well when they're making some of these, especially on these technical. We need these kinds of guidelines. We put them in place for hospitals. We put them in place for other institutions. Why not for solar? And I agree with everyone. It's not that we're against moving forward. It's just we want to go forward in an informed and thoughtful way. So I think we have a really strong team, including our planning board and planning staff, to move quickly toward a well thought out bylaw. And the moratorium creates impetus for that. It says, move quickly toward it. We didn't even have this discussion before this was brought to us last fall. So I really thank the sponsors for bringing it to us. And I think we need it.
Okay. I'm going to go to Pat since she's not spoken yet.
Let me see. There are several things that I want to say, and I want to thank everyone for their comments, whether you agree with the moratorium or not. But I'd like to share a couple of things right away in reaction to, the perception of Amherst and a white lens. Amherst believes itself to be progressive, and in many instances it is. But everyone who has been on the council or watched council meetings knows the limits of that progressiveness. And I say that in sadness. One of the things that ECAC did when they created the CARP report was to deeply and clearly integrate social justice issues and equity issues into the plan. And I believe that is critical. So I want us to look a little bit at what a white lens might also be. It's very easy for white people, particularly privileged white people with money, developers, etc., to say, my way is the right way. This is the only thing we can do, and we need to do it now. Or we're going to lose. We're going to lose. What none of that takes into consideration is what conserving forests and undeveloped lands, why that's so critically important. If you go to the 2050 roadmap, and it's been used this way, we have to build solar installations. Right now, we got to get the solar panels up. But there are other parts of the 2050 roadmap that really address the critical nature of forests. And that's what a drive to only do a solar installation without pause is forgetting. And there are deep debates about that. But one of the reasons I also, and I'm scattered, I apologize, but one of the other reasons that I bring up the social justice issue is we have to look at what we have in Western Massachusetts. We have to look at, even in a smaller way, what we have in Amherst. And in Western Mass and in Amherst, we have large swatches of forest, which do incredible things to protect wildlife, to protect the water, to cool the planet, to sequester carbon, and I could go on. We have that, and we can regionalize our system so that people in Northampton and Pelham and and right here in Hampshire County benefit. But by looking at what we have and looking out to Hampden County, looking out to Holyoke, looking out to Springfield, we can see there's something that they have that which is an incredible amount of building, rooftops, etc. And one of the things that would be an actual social justice driven event was to find how to use state and federal funding to create retrofits on homeowners, on apartment complexes, on doing that to address people who can't afford to retrofit their house. To make that possible steps out of the usual lens. And therefore, I feel strongly that saving and maintaining forests, which includes, right, using it as infrastructure, using the wood from forests, sustainably managing forests, is what we have right here that would benefit by creating clean air, by guaranteeing water. So none of this is as simple as any of us want to make it. And I think it seems to me, and there are lots of questions. I have all kinds of notes that I want to answer, and I will come back to. And I'm going to ask Anna and Lynn. We'll be coming back next week. But I just want to be careful about really seeing all the people in our community and prioritizing what would benefit people and prioritizing what would honestly make up a fair share by Amherst. And I don't know what that looks like. Okay, I don't know. I do know that several of the projects we have, we have 8 acres of 20 acres on Bay Road, Hampshire College did. We see limits about size. At Pulpit Hill, it's 12.4 acres of 16.5 acres of land. Belchertown Road, the landfill, our landfill that we're so proud of, we're only doing 8 acres of 16.5 acres. So it seems to me the size of the installation is critical. And we don't have time to do that if we don't use them, if we don't take a stance and stand forward for this moratorium. I have a button on my refrigerator and it uses my favorite word, and some of you will know what that is, but I'm going to more gently say it. It's got a picture of a guy with a fedora and a trench coat, and it says, "Hey, we're Americans. We mess things up." And that's what I think we're doing by assuming that the only thing that we should be doing with speed is installing ground-mounted solar in forest lands. That is not the only thing. And we're going to have to do some of that. But what are the guidelines? What are the regulations? What are the costs? Shalane asked, what are the costs of delay? And I want to know, what are the costs of barreling ahead without really looking at the issues? No, I'm sorry if it was a bit of a rant, but you know me.
Okay. I'm trying to see, Anna, you've spoken, Mandy Jo. So we're back to other people who would like to speak again. Anna?
Thanks. So I've been trying to write down the questions, and so I'd love to take you up on your offer, Michelle, to have you email those to us as well, and other folks too. I want to capture them. Anika, towns that have done moratoriums: Blandford, Athol, Ware, Haverhill. There have been a few other towns across the state, and I'm happy to send along some information about those as well. Here's the thing I do want to use my time to mention, and Athena, if you want to start the clock, I will abide by it, I promise. So the thing I want to just talk about is this council's I believe, first opportunity to deeply apply an equity lens to policy. And so this is where we have work to do. Right now, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say our policy was not crafted. It's not that big of a limb. Our policy was not crafted with an equity lens, right? That's my take on it. What this allows us to do, what a pause allows us to do, is say, what do we need to include in a solar siting study that takes into account equity, that takes into account socioeconomic status, that takes into account race? Where are we citing projects so that it's not just in certain people's backyards, right? So that it is equitably applied across this town. So, in my mind, Michelle, your point is another reason to do this temporary moratorium. It's to make sure that when we are crafting this bylaw, we have done a study that takes that into account. And to that point, it's something that we will make sure that working group knows to add to that study. The other thing, I'm just looking, sorry, at my kind of scattered notes here. I'd love this in writing so that I could respond back a little bit more eloquently. Someone asked about what guidelines the ZBA is using, and just to be very clear, like Kathy said, there is no consistent set of regulations that they are able to apply to projects. Our ZBA is wonderful, our planning board is wonderful, and we are asking them to look case by case, and that's barreling towards inequities in this. I think that's all I've got in my notes, but there are definitely questions that I'd love time to respond to as well. Thank you.
Andy Jo?
Thank you. We don't need a moratorium to apply an equity lens to a solar siting bylaw. We can do that while we're crafting the bylaw, whether or not there is a moratorium. I'm still struggling to understand why a moratorium that actually will not really have any on-the-ground effects, because the developers we know that have enough land in Amherst to build solar have applied for their preliminary subdivision plans, and therefore the moratorium won't affect them. I'm having trouble understanding why a moratorium is necessary to create a solar siting bylaw when the moratorium won't have any on-the-ground effects. We can create that bylaw, we can do it with an equity lens, but we don't need a moratorium to do that. To respond to, it's only 15 months. In the CRC public hearing, I pressed both the sponsors and I asked the planning department about that timeline. And the sponsors, specifically President Griesemer, said she's not opposed to seeking an extension of that May 31st, 2023 deadline. So people are talking about it being a definite end in May 31, 2023, but anyone can seek to change that date. And if it passes this council, that's longer. And the fact that one sponsor has already indicated they're not opposed to seeking an extension concerns me. The other thing that concerns me is our sustainability director, Stephanie Ciccarello, indicated that it's a 6 to 12 month process to do the solar study, and that the bylaw cannot be completely done at the same time, that some of the work for the bylaw can be done while the solar study is being done, but not all of the work. And we've seen with less complicated bylaws, the particularly mixed use buildings, that when it even came to the council for a hearing, it took 5 months at the council. So if we're looking at a 6 to 12 month study, more time to even get the bylaw to the council, the money for the solar siting is not completely available right now. I don't see how we even have a bylaw by May 31, 2023. And so I'm not convinced it ends, the temporary moratorium ends May 31st, 2023.
Anika?
Thank you. I want to thank also both Michelle and Pat for their comments. And where I love Amherst so much, I think that it's clear that, we haven't been a progressive town in terms of issues with equity and race since the Indigenous, up until the good work that the Community Safety Working Group is doing. And with that said, in terms of making this maybe just an A and B issue and a for or against, I also represent some residents who are not just A and B. They may have other issues, and they really are, conflicted. And we hear a lot about reasons that we need the moratorium, reasons that we don't, but is there, and maybe I'm just hoping, like wishful thinking, like what will happen during the moratorium that will help? Like, will there be some sort of agreement to actually like use less power or something that will actually be an additional benefit to a pause aside from studies?
Okay, thank you. Alicia?
Thank you. I just wanted to share my outlook on this because I've been pretty quiet, but most of the things that I had wanted to say have already been said in one way or another. But just so everyone knows what's kind of going on in my head right now, because I'm thinking of a lot of things. And first is that, the climate crisis is real and it is urgent. And I don't think that any of us disagree with that. And so this is about like what steps we're taking to move forward. And to me, I don't see this as us slowing things down, rather us taking the time to get it right. And so my fear also is the unintended implications of not passing the moratorium. Then what happens if a project goes through that does have detrimental effect in the future? Or what happens if something goes through and we find out long down the road that we need to go back and change it, redo it again? There are all of these things where we can just take the time to get it right the first time and not worry about that. I think that it is a greater risk we are imposing on the people in this town if we just allow things to go forward. And I know that there are certain things that we can't stop right now, but those things are not going to stop. So those things are not affected, but we're talking about other things that may happen in the future. And I think that as leaders, it is our job to consider those things more heavily, because it is going to be harder for us to stand up here in years to come and say we messed up and we should have taken the time to stop than it would be to say we took the time to get it right and we got it right the first time. And I know it's hard because the climate crisis is so urgent, and that 1 year of time does not seem like that much time if you look at a timeline of all of time. And it is a lot of time in terms of the climate crisis. But again, solar is not the only way. That's not the only mitigating things and activities and things that we can be investing our time and our money in that will help mitigate the effects of the climate crisis. And there are other things we can be focusing on in the meantime. And so we have the Climate Action Resiliency Report, and there are many different steps and other things that we can be doing in the meantime, because again, we're already at an alarming rate. Like we're already past overdue taking action, right? So like not taking any action isn't really an option, but this isn't our only option. And I think that we have better options that we know we can move forward with right now while we take a deeper look into this. And I also support solar. And I think that we eventually will get this right and we'll have the solar that we need and we'll figure it out. But like, let's get it right the first time and not have to worry about, coming back to this again at another point and having to mitigate something more serious.
Pat? Shalini, you had your hand up and took it down. Is it up? Is it down?
I was going to let Pat respond first to that and then.
Okay. Pat, did you want to speak at this point? You need to unmute, honey.
Sorry, old habits die hard. One of the things I wanted to respond to is what would be happening during the moratorium. One, there would be work on a bylaw going on. There would be hopefully a collaborative group, including the sustainability coordinator and other people in town who would be working together collaboratively to create that bylaw and to work on the solar study. But there are other things that can happen. One is conversations can happen with developers, not having them sit on a committee creating the bylaw. That would be inappropriate. That's like inviting the fox in to design the hen house. But to have a conversation about why forest management, sustainable management, is a critical piece in how it supports healthy forests. What are some of the issues that they deal with? And you know, I sound a little like Chalonnet in a good way, in that conversation can be critically important. I would like to talk to other people in the planning department. I'd like to talk to Guilford Mooring. I'd like to understand what we're doing on a broader way. And I think that, you know, I can't, you know, it's really too bad that preliminary subdivision plans were put into place because of fear. Because the person who put them in place was very afraid that something was going to happen in a bylaw that was going to make things really bad for them. And that's really sad because we're dealing with fear. And that fear echoes in my life. It echoes in each of our lives. It echoes in the decision that we have to make the solar installation now. What we need is time, as Alicia said, to get it right. And that involves a lot of stakeholders finding ways to really collaborate, not bullying, not trying to direct, but really finding ways to talk and collaborate. That's critical. And I think it's something that can be done. And, you know, I'm only going to say one more thing, and I will shut up. The preliminary subdivision plans, it is totally in support of developers because it does nothing for a community. It means, and I stand corrected, I will be corrected if I'm wrong, but it does seem to me, as it was interpreted to me by the person who wanted to do it, is I can put down anything I want and I can change my mind later. And that's a tactic that we allow in the Commonwealth in terms of development. Maybe we allow it federally, but whatever steps we can take to pull back and spend time to think and not just react is critical. And that's what the moratorium is about.
Pam?
I'd like to ask Christine Brestrup if she would kindly clarify that the subdivision that was submitted, I understood when I heard that from her that it was Cole property. Cole is a housing developer. I didn't realize or didn't understand that it was for solar. If Christine could please say something about that. Thank you.
Christine, please.
So it's part of state law that landowners are able to freeze the zoning on their property by submitting a preliminary subdivision plan. And then within 7 months of submitting the preliminary, submitting a definitive subdivision plan and having it approved by the planning board. And that can freeze the zoning on the property. They don't have to really tell you what the use is going to be for the subdivision plan that they're proposing. A subdivision plan is really just showing a proposed roadway or right of way with a piece of pavement in the middle of it, and then showing lots off that roadway. That's all a subdivision plan is. So the preliminary subdivision plan is, I haven't looked at it carefully. We've got 4 of them for 4 different properties, but that's, anybody's welcome to come into town hall and look at it if they want to. It's really just a roadway with lots off of it. Very little information needs to be put on the preliminary subdivision plan. Once the definitive is going to be submitted, it needs to be more definitive. It needs to show grading. It needs to show where you're getting your utilities from, how you're going to pave the road. You need to have details about utilities and things, but it's all, I don't want to say make-believe, but it's all ephemeral. It's not something that the person necessarily ever intends to build. It's just a mechanism for freezing zoning. And the person who owns the property can then go and do something entirely different with their property. And they don't have to adhere to the subdivision plan unless they actually start to take advantage of it. For instance, if they sold a lot that's shown on this roadway, they'd have to build the road first and then they'd have to sell the lot. But that would be kind of initiating or instigating the construction of the subdivision. But if they don't do anything like that, then they're not obliged to follow the subdivision plan. Rob Mora and I had a conversation with an attorney from KP Law about this. And, that's what we were told. So it's really just it's sort of a, I don't know what you want to call it. It's a potentially a vestigial aspect of Massachusetts land use law. And I think it was in response to, back a number of decades ago when a lot of subdivisions were being built and towns would try to change their zoning when they got an inkling that a subdivision was coming in. And this was to protect the rights of landowners to do what they intended to do with their property. So I think that explains it. If Rob has anything else to say, you might want to hear from him. Rob?
Just to kind of complete the whole process, the freeze that would be granted to a developer in that situation is 8 years from the endorsement of the plan by the planning board. And there's even an opportunity to, take your time bringing your plan back to the planning board to be endorsed. So after the 7 months, up to 7 months to create your definitive plan, getting your approval from the planning board, and then taking your time to bring back the plan to be endorsed are all things that can occur before the freeze period actually begins. So it could turn out to be a really long time.
Thank you. Chris, did you have further comments you wanted to make?
No, thank you.
Okay. Shalini?
Okay, so we all agree this is a complex issue. And, if one thing mindfulness has taught me is humility, to say, I don't know. And that's what I started with, is I don't know what is the impact of stopping for 18 months. I don't know what will happen. What if we actually allow development and we don't have the rules? What is going to happen? There was 101 questions in my head. So what did I do is I went and spoke to 100 people, not 100, but I've spoken to at least 20 people. And so I reached out to, right now, when we talk about experts, we are known, as Jennifer said, we are known for our leading scientists, experts. So I did reach out to the leading scientists and experts at UMass, which is the Energy Transitions Institute. And the letter that I mentioned, again, these are people who are coming at environmental and climate crisis through the lens of sustainability, through the lens of equity, justice, economics, equity, all of these. So these are experts who are telling us moratorium is not a good idea. We got a letter from Tom Davies today. He's the Amherst College Director of Design and Construction and he spearheads the solar and the renewable energy program at Amherst College. He wrote to us that he does not recommend a moratorium. We got an email, I believe, from Todd Holland, who he oversaw the Hampshire College solar project, and he does not support the moratorium. So I'm not sure which experts we're talking about when we say that the experts have spoken and they are not supporting, and the new science says that it's not new science that we shouldn't cut trees. It's very old science that we should not be cutting trees, except we've really screwed up badly. And now we do have to, and except we are going to be extremely thoughtful because we are Amherst and we do things really slowly. Hence, there are solutions, like I said, with the ZBA. Is that a fact? And I asked one of the staff, what would be the advantage of using an external consultant, even if ZBA doesn't know what questions to ask? But firstly, I want to clarify, the email we got was not from ZBA as a group. It was from the individual chair. that he is in favor of the moratorium. And I understand he's struggling with because we don't have clear criteria. So yes, we will keep working on the criteria. In the meanwhile, instead of waiting for 18 months and not knowing knowing what impact that has, because we've received this email from all of these people saying moratorium is bad under the current conditions, can we use the consultant according to the, whatever I said, 83B, and they do these projects, they tell us about soil. In fact, you know what? We don't even know if the land that is proposed right now, if it goes to the consultant, they may actually come and look at the land and say, this is not even the right place. So we don't even know that.
Shalini, I want to be very clear. There is no land presently proposed right now for a solar project. Except
well, we know there's going to be one, and there was. So hypothetically, if that was a project that was in the pipeline, hypothetically, could we go to use that provision of the state law to get a consultant that would guide the ZBA through this process so we can do it thoughtfully? In fact, the struggles that we have there, could be input for writing a really rigorous bylaw.
Chris?
I just wanted to say that you can't go to a consultant sort of like open-ended and say, tell us all about what's wrong or right about this project. You have to have specific questions, and they have to be related to an area of jurisdiction of the group that's asking the questions. So in other words, for the Zoning Board of Appeals, it would be looking at section 10.38, which is their list of criteria that they use to grant special permits, and figuring out which of those things do you not have enough information about or do you not understand well enough, and asking the consultant to help to answer those questions. But it has to be specifically about something that's under the jurisdiction of the group that's doing the review. So it's not kind of a blanket open-ended, tell us what you think about this project or whether this is a good citing for this project. I just wanted to make that clear.
Follow-up question? Follow-up question?
Yes, please.
Can we still ask about the soil, the water, whatever is known right now, like in terms of, is this the right place given the proximity to the water bodies or the private wells that we have over there, or given the slope of the land? Can we ask those basic questions?
Chris?
Yes, you can ask specific questions. Like you could ask, is this project going to have a negative impact on nearby wells? Or is this project likely to have severe problems with erosion or something like that? So those are specific questions that you could ask of a third-party consultant.
Thank you. So, I just want to put it out there that so we're all on the same page that we can get a consultant for all the basic things that we've talked about today. We could get a consultant to guide us through that process while we're writing the bylaw.
My understanding is that if a project is proposed and there is certain questions about that piece of land, that as long as the town is asking the question and the party proposing is willing to pay for the consultant, yes. That's what I understood. Okay. Michelle. Chris, did you have a further clarification on that?
I think that it's not necessarily a question of whether the applicant is willing to pay for the consultant. It's sort of something that's written into state law, that if the board has a legitimate concern about something and they don't have the expertise in-house to figure it out, then they can require the applicant to pay for a consultant to examine this question, and then the consultant needs to do it. And if the consultant doesn't do it, then he forfeits his right to have the special permit. And I imagine that these things can be brought to court. So it's not a black and white thing, but it's a requirement.
Thank you.
It's section 53G of the state law that requires the solar company to pay the town for the consultant, and we hire the consultant, which would be an independent consultant from the solar, to help us through the process. Thank you.
Michelle?
Yeah, can it be clarified when you say the developer has the right to freeze the zoning? Does that mean that any bylaw that we are to create now that there is a developer who has gone ahead and submitted subdivision plans, does that mean that the bylaw will not apply to their development?
Chris, I think I would interpret that broadly, not just in relationship to this bylaw, please.
Yes, and you might want to ask Rob to chime in, but yes, that's what it means. It means that any zoning change that you were proposing, I mean, we've had a number of these filed this year. The developer of 11 and 13 East Pleasant Street was concerned about zoning bylaws that were going through the pipeline over the summer. So he filed a preliminary subdivision plan to protect his property. He ended up withdrawing it because he realized that he could work with the zoning bylaws that were potentially troublesome to him. We also have a subdivision plan, preliminary subdivision plan that was submitted by a person who owns land at the corner of Gray Street and Main Street because he's concerned about the new mixed-use building bylaw and how it will affect his ability to develop his property. So he's working through that process as well. So it's not something that's peculiar to the particular issue of solar development or anything. It happens, I won't say it happens frequently, but it happens often. Maybe that's a better word.
Okay. Dorothy?
Can I call the question?
There is no question tonight. I'm going to actually call the question in that I'm going to ask Anna, you were keeping notes on questions. And would you like any of those questions clarified?
No, but I would love any and all of them also emailed to me, please.
Okay. Are there any questions Anna would like them emailed to her? Okay. This comes back for its second reading on the 28th. We do not have a meeting for 3 weeks. At this, Shalini, yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Since we've all agreed this is a complex issue, and can we get in actual different like hydrologists or scientists to inform us about, because we're speculating there is no impact. It's just 18 months. What if you were hit by hurricanes? Like I had a friend in Colorado whose house was destroyed by the wildfires. If we were that town with wildfires because of climate change or hurricanes, would we have said, let's wait for 18 months and figure this out? So can we please we're all just sitting here. I've still read like 30 papers and I know you all have too, but can we please invite people who know about this and look at it from different perspectives and then tell us? I have spoken to those people and I'm convinced that this is not a good idea because we can control each project for what it is based on consultants, independent consultants, while we write a rigorous bylaw and we incorporate everything else in the CARP thing, which is mitigating like buildings, transportation, doing it with equity. We are losing also, this is not the main point, but we are losing pilot money, $70,000 to $100,000, which could be going into equitable use of putting in renewable energy on lower income people's house. I'm not saying that should be driving a decision. Money should never drive our decisions, but I'm just saying let's put that also, given that we are not going to change what's happening with current. And last thing, to answer Michelle's question, even though the subdivision plots will not be affected with moratorium, they will still be going through the existing processes, which means we can still ask for the consultant and go through the rigorous process, even with those projects that are filing for subdivisions. So they are not spared from the rigor of the town of Amherst processes. Okay, that's all.
Thank you very much.
Question.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Okay.
Shalini, I would like to give someone else a chance to talk and then also see if we can move on. Jennifer?
Yes, I just wanted to, I guess, respond in terms of we've received the council members, and they've been posted in public comment for everyone to see. I mean, many letters. I think actually more have been supportive of the moratorium than not. So I just wouldn't want to have the impression out there that we've gotten letters from lots of experts that have advised against, supporting the moratorium, because we've received many on both sides. I think what I've read, there's been more in support of supporting this bylaw. And I think, that in terms of inviting experts in to advise us on, what we would, the consequences of having the pause. I mean, there's so many opinions on, I don't know. I don't think we can invite 3 people in and we're going to get a definitive response. I think that's just going to, it would be, and I think that's who will be advising the working group working on the bylaw, is they will be looking to experts with different points of view. But I don't, in my reading interpretation of the letters and comments we've received, I haven't read it as the experts are advising us to vote against this bylaw amendment. And I think that we would be challenged to invite experts to come in now and advise the council. That would be of one point of view and would convince us to go one way or the other. Thank you.
Pat, I'm going to call on you.
Quick, I want to say that bringing in experts and all of that and educating the council, this is all a reason to have the moratorium.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the rest of our agenda and reiterate to please send Anna, Pat, or myself any of your questions. We are doing committee and liaison reports. We're up to GOL. Michelle?
Paul has his hand up.
I'm sorry, Paul.
Thank you, Lynn. Just clarification. You're okay with Chris and Rob leaving at this point? And just
yes. And thanking them for being here.
And just, do you want to give an update on what is the next step for the solar moratorium bylaw? So when it will come up next for the council?
Thank you. First of all, Chris and Rob, thank you for being here. Doug, you've ducked out too fast for me to thank you for spending time with us. And also thank you as a planning board for getting started on talking about a solar bylaw. And Chris and Rob, the same thing, because I know you're talking about it and putting together a charge for a committee and looking into how much a study would cost, et cetera. So that has nothing to do with the moratorium. It has everything to do with creating a solar bylaw. The next steps on this solar bylaw, on the temporary moratorium, is it will come back to the council for the second reading on the 28th of February. And at that point, we will have a motion and a vote. Okay. Any questions about that? Then I want to go to GOL. Michelle?
Sure.
On committee updates.
So outside of reviewing the moratorium, the main focus of our one meeting that we've had since the last meeting was the role of liaisons to town committees. And so we talked about what is the role. We looked at the rules of procedure and what is outlined there. And we also discussed what committees would most benefit. So we solicited input from all of the counselors. What is the counselor capacity to serve as liaisons? And again, started to look at the rules of procedure, specifically the role of liaisons. So we'll be continuing that discussion at our next GOL meeting, and then we'll move on to our discussion on the full rules of procedure. I would like to highlight that on Wednesday, we will be joining the town council will be joining the Human Rights Commission to read the Lunar New Year proclamation, and we hope everyone can join us, and that will be virtual.
Right. At 6 o'clock. right?
At
Thank you.
6 o'clock.
At
Yes.
6 o'clock. Okay. Anika, Jones Library Building Committee. Has there been any meetings since you met last? Since last time we met?
No, and we actually have our next meeting has been postponed until next week.
Okay, thank you. Town Services and Outreach, Dorothy?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Shalini, did you have a question?
Yeah, just for the Jones Library, can you share what's the reason for the postponement of the meetings?
Paul?
Yes, it didn't get posted by 4:30 on Friday, so it has to be rescheduled.
And another question, are the appointments done, or are we still waiting for appointments?
There's one vacancy still available, and we're interviewing for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. TSO?
TSO met and unanimously recommended the town council approve the town manager appointment of Doug Slaughter to the Board of License Commissioners, effective immediately for a term to expire June 30th, 2024. We voted unanimously to adopt a meeting schedule as edited at the February 1st meeting, and that is posted, I believe. Then TSO agreed by consensus to hold a public hearing on March 10th at 6:30, the regular meeting time of TSO, on recommendations on parking permit program revisions presented by Sean Mangano from Finance and Jennifer LaFountain for Treasurer Collector. And we'll hear input from the TAC, the Transportation Advisory Committee, and the Finance Committee at our next meeting on February 17th. After the March 10th public hearing, TSO will deliberate, make a recommendation to town council. So they'll be ready for the town's July 1st implementation. The other items of discussion were putting together the work plan and trying to get that straightened out. We had some public comment on unsafe sidewalks, and we had some clarification. If there was a sidewalk that was not shoveled and it was a dangerous sidewalk, who do you call? And the answer was the dispatch police desk, okay, which was new to some of us. And that's basically what we worked on. So any questions you can ask me.
Any questions? Yes, Kathy.
Is the plan on the hearing, Dorothy, to go with exactly what was proposed? Or is there, when you discuss it again on February 17th, is it possible, as people come and make comments, that you might go out with a somewhat revised version?
Well, I'm going to say what I think, and I stand here ready to be corrected. I believe that TSO can make some changes in the recommendation. So I'm now asking Paul if I am incorrect in that.
Yes, that's correct. So you decide what you would like to advertise. You have a proposal in front of you, but you can adjust that.
And just to follow up, so would the time, if any of us want to make specific comments that we didn't when it just was proposed, would it be come to the February 17th? And then I'm going to look at Lynn. If several of us show up, can we do a meeting of the whole so we don't have to do it just as the public? You know, how do we participate would be my question.
It's really up to the chair, but if the chair would like to hold a committee of the whole, they are more than welcome to. And if they would particularly like to hold it and designate a time during the meeting, usually at the beginning is often desirable, then we can publish it and hold it that way. So that it would be a time specific to discuss the proposals if you want additional presentations. Dorothy?
I think that would be a good idea. I still part of me, so I would agree that a committee of the whole would be a good idea so that we'd have a free and full discussion. So I'm going to follow up on this. So if as a result of our meeting on the 17th, when we hear from the TAC and we hear from finance and we hear from public input, well, that comes to us on the 17th, if we make changes in the recommendation, then that's what we would have to publicize for the forum on March 10th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so
And
it's
can I
still
just clarify,
timeframe?
it would be February 17th that you would like to do the committee of the whole?
Yes.
Okay. And I know that Athena has made note of that. Okay,
She
and
did.
that would be at 6:30 on the 17th.
Yes.
Okay, and will you include any additional, I mean, I assume Sean will be there so he can answer questions related to the original proposals. Paul, yes? Yeah, okay. Mandy Jo, you have your hand up on this issue, I assume?
Yeah, on Thursday, February 17th from 5 to 7 p.m. JCPC meets. So I assume Sean's going to be in JCPC at that time, at least till 7 p.m.
So what we really want to see is whether or not TSO can meet at 7 on that night.
That sounds like a reasonable thing to do. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Mandy Jo, thank you.
Mandy Jo. That's a very good catch. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Especially since we are cutting JCPC short this Thursday night, because it's just an opening session of it anyway. Okay. That concludes the committee reports. Paul, any particular comments at this point or questions to Paul? Mandy Jo?
Yes, just a quick one. Why was Winterfest canceled?
That was a decision made because of I can't give you a really great reason for that one, honestly. It was a decision made by the director and his staff feeling like it was not a safe thing to do, to be presenting events that were where people would gather. Subsequent to that, they are now scheduling some events during school vacation week that can help address the needs of families during school vacation week.
Okay. Dorothy?
On the question of liaisons, this relates to the GOL proposal. I've had a request from a constituent to get some liaisons to committees. And one committee in particular was mentioned, the Health Committee. So it sounds like this is a very slow and stately process at this time. How soon can we have council liaisons connected to some of the committees?
Michelle, do you want to speculate on when you think you're going to be forwarding with recommendation?
I think we'll be complete at our next, I hope that we'll be completed with that discussion at our next meeting, which, the second meeting, Mandy has it right there. Otherwise, I'm going to just quickly
February 16th.
Thank you. Yeah, February 16th is our next meeting. So I think we'd hope to have the recommendation completed.
So we would make that recommendation would come to the council on the 28th, and on the 28th, if we want, we can approve the list of recommended liaisons and also any changes to the rules of procedure that around liaisons, if we're going to do anything. And we can also go ahead that night and just by having people volunteer as to which committees they would like to be liaison to, just settle it right then and there.
Just to clarify, Lynn, if we do change the rules of procedure for any reason, does that have to be read at 2 meetings?
That has to be read at 2 meetings. That's absolutely correct. Unless we're looking at drastic changes, I don't think that should prohibit us from going ahead and starting to get people lined up as liaisons. So if they're drastic changes, then I think people need to know what they're signing up for. Okay. Unless other people have some thoughts on that. No? Michelle, you have your hand up.
I do, yeah. So are we in the town manager report?
We are.
Okay. So I had a question, Paul. In the town manager report, you talk about community choice aggregation. And this is something new to me that I'm doing a little research on my own, and perhaps we can talk offline about this, but I'm just wondering if you can just say briefly what this is, and also, does this impact our solar plans, I guess, and how does it impact our solar plans?
Yeah, so it's community choice aggregation is where the residents of the community and businesses would be able to purchase the electricity through an aggregated group, which would include the city of Northampton and Pelham, instead of having direct relationship with Eversource. And then with that buying power, there is some ability to leverage different kinds of activities, and we can say, for instance, emphasize the purchase of green power and things like that. So that's in a nutshell, and I would have to defer to Stephanie Ciccarelli for a more detailed sort of assessment of how that works.
The only thing I would suggest is Cape Cod has one of the most active and oldest collaboratives like this. Although my understanding is, unless they've changed it, they don't have a requirement for green energy. They just do a collective buy. Okay. And it reduces the price. The people that we've seen most interested in it, in many instances, are people for whom solar does not work on their roof and or on their property, and they would therefore like to do another mechanism of reducing carbon footprint. Okay. But you're correct. Stephanie, contact Paul. Stephanie Ciccarelli can provide all kinds of information on this one. Jennifer.
Yes, I had a question for Paul on the town manager's report. You had, quick question, mentioned that there were ARPA funds available for assistance to small businesses. Mm-hmm. And can an individual business, I mean, could they apply? I mean, what is the process?
So we're still developing that program. And it will give grants to small businesses that we're trying to help incubate in the town, and help give them a little bit of work that they might need in terms of, say, if they need to do an architectural plan in order to get a permit through the town boards, we would help be able to support that sort of development of an architectural plan for that project, things like that.
So it's for a new business?
For the, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not for the sustaining businesses. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions of the town manager? Paul, is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, there are a couple things I would as we're continue to review the mask mandate, and that's sort of the next thing that we're reviewing. We're seeing a little bit of lightening up, that the dial's twisting back, which is really great. And the health director continues to monitor that, and being in touch with the schools. The governor today talked about maybe loosening the mask mandate in the schools. So we want to be sort of in sync with that. I don't think you're going to see any relief of that at the university or the colleges, but we are, just so you know, that we're thinking about those things. So people start to raise that. We've come up with a better system for uploading. As you recall, because we're meeting virtually, all of our meetings are on YouTube, which means they're all being recorded. We have a better system now, so that they will all get uploaded and better organized on our YouTube channel. Before, it was done on a request basis, and we were missing meetings. So now we've got a system in place where every Friday, any meetings that happened in the previous 7 days will be uploaded automatically, and people will be able to see them. And then the good news, our staff is just spectacular at getting grants. We were one of the communities that was announced today on the news to get a charging station, electric vehicles charging station. This is one of the one of the Tesla level ones that are not Tesla brand, I don't think, but just a fast charging station. And this sometimes becomes an economic driver. People will come and find it because they have a car that would like to charge quicker. So we were able to get a grant for that. So that's a really good thing. And then the last thing is we'll be starting our community chats back up. We took a hiatus on that, but with the building projects and with the budget coming forward, we feel like it's a good time to start having these opportunities for the public to have informal conversations. And so our first one will be on February 17th. And we've asked the chair of the school committee and the chair of the elementary school building committee to be present to talk about the elementary school building project. And these are sort of quick sort of conversations, but very conversational, no presentations, just ask us your questions. And then we post those online as well, which are, and these oddly, these community chats are one of the more popular things that people go to watch.
And those are usually at noon, Paul?
At noon on Thursdays, typically, yes.
Okay. All right. Shalini, you had a question?
Yes, Paul, can you tell us about the economic empowerment? You said you're developing options. So where are we in the process there?
Yeah, so we have a person on staff now who's working through all the ARPA contracts. And so that is one that's the third on our list of moving that through. And we're still working out some of the details about what that actually will look like, what that job entails. I've had some pretty concrete conversations with the bid director. This is a proposal that was recommended by the chamber. So we will be working with both the chamber and the bid on this to sort of leverage the great work that they're doing. And we're just sort of forming that up in a little bit better way right now.
And I think, Paul, my recollection is that it would be a town-wide position, not
Yes.
just a downtown position.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Are there other questions? Paul, anything else for updates?
Nope, that's it for me.
Okay. Then we're moving on to town councilor comments. I provided you with the president's report. Is there any question on that? Anna.
You had mentioned the status of the Merry Maple, and I'm curious what that status is.
Well, the Merry Maple is a tree that is in very serious trouble, and a tree that's very near and dear to our hearts. But for example, the bid, evidently, when they went to get it decorated this last year, 3 companies wouldn't even touch it because it's like limbs are falling down, and we're even concerned when people gather under it. And so there is going to have to be a fond farewell at some point, I'm afraid.
Is there a timeline at some point, meaning?
Paul, I don't know. Do you have a better chance of?
No, that's up to the tree warden to make the assessment and make the recommendation for when we would do that. Then it would probably have a hearing with the Shade Tree Committee.
Right. And there are some conversations, I guess, going on about can there be mementos developed out of the wood and stuff like that. It's a pretty emotional issue, to be honest, for an awful lot of people, including Kathy.
Well, I'll just build on that last comment, but I had another comment, but uses of the tree when it comes down. Smith, when they built this amazing library, they took a beloved tree that came down and turned it into a pretty amazing table. And, you know, with a big slab of the tree, and everyone knows where that table came from. You know, it's not a table, it's like a slab of a tree with some legs on it. So there might be something creative we could do with it. So I just wanted to thank you, Lynn. Buried in your report that went on, kind of a daily set of things that you're doing, was you quickly put together some testimony. There is a bill in front of the, there were hearings in the Department of Revenue on a bill that would make us less in a begging situation for pilots, potentially. It would put a value, an assessed value on nonprofit and public property over 15 million, and then would allow at town option to tax up to 25% of it. And Lynn put in a brief, very powerful testimony. I did my normal, more analytic one that probably won't have the impact that hers did. But I put in some because it would make a world of difference for us if we got movement on that. So thank you, Lynn, for the extra effort. We knew she was going in for the funding authority for non-schools and non-libraries, but in addition, she did another quick one. Thank you.
And let me mention that the reason I didn't bring the pilot one to the to the council is these hearings have a way of kind of sneaking up on you. And if I don't hit the council meeting in time to give you, then I have to kind of finesse it. There is another one that is, it's not as much a hearing, but remember the whole mosquito problem with the mosquito stuff last year? Well, guess what? They have a meeting on Thursday. So I've signed up to go to the meeting because we, as you might remember, didn't get our plan approved and it became a controversial discussion. But I will be more than glad to forward that meeting information to anybody else who would like to attend the meeting on mosquito control. Paul.
Just to go back to trees, so I just wanted to mention a couple things. One at the Kendrick Park playground, there were some trees that were taken down. That wood from the trees was milled on Pomeroy at a small mill that's there, and then placed as places in the park that kids can walk or anybody can walk on. And so we reuse that wood. And also in South Amherst, when the tree,
Mount Pollux
tree came down, the select board had arranged to have some of that wood carved into a gavel for the new town council, which is in the town room or someplace. And so that's another way of reusing wood that we've taken from beloved trees.
When we're in the town room, Athena, carefully make sure I have that gavel. I'll make sure I point it out to people when we meet in the town room on the 28th. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Any comments from counselors in general? Anna.
Yeah, I just wanted to get everybody really excited about our retreat. I think there's been a lot of really careful planning, and I'm really thrilled that we are, I think, Shalini and I both met with the facilitators, and we were both really excited about the person we went with. I think that she's bringing a really human-centered approach and really is going to focus on our processes of how we work together. So I'm very much looking forward to it, and looking forward to working with you all and learning together. So I just wanted to kind of plug that one more time.
Great. Thank you. Okay. All right. Then this meeting is adjourned and it is 9:41. Enjoy.
Thanks, everyone.
Be careful going home.
Yeah.